special Pledge of Allegiance that's going to be led by the newest police officer for the Norwood PD. Officer Baguma, can you bring our newest officer to the front to lead us in the pledge? He's coming up here. How can you not like a meeting that starts with a puppy? Can everybody please rise to join in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome.
Great,
Thank you, Officer Baguma. It's no coincidence that you'll be voting on the police budget tonight. All right, a few brief reminders. First of all, NCM is carrying the meeting live, so please remember, no funny faces. You're always on camera. If anybody watched the replay from the other night, you are always on camera, even when you least expect it. Remember to please stand when I recognize you when you want to speak. Wait for the mic. Our mic runner is ready and able. Thanks again for a great job the other night. Or you can come to the front if you'd like to use the podium and the mic up front. When you're recognized, state your name and your district, or if you're not a town meeting member, if you're just a citizen, state your name and address. Remember, if you're the sponsor or part of an interested group in a particular, that you're speaking, to identify yourself as such. Also, please remember, and I didn't really enforce this a lot the other night, but I really want to keep us moving tonight. So if you do have questions, you should address them through the moderator, not directly to somebody, whether it's a town official up here or somebody else, a town employee who might be answering. And with that, general reminder that sponsors of articles receive 10 minutes to speak. If you are a regular speaker, you have 5, and I am timing. So you can get 1 extension if the body grants it. And hopefully everybody will abide by those rules and we'll have a smooth night. So tonight we're actually going to take up the annual budget. That will be Article 4, but before we start Article 4, I believe that the FinCom has a presentation to set the table, as our good friend Judy Langone would say, as we embark on the budget. Mr. Slater?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Welcome to everyone. Whoever watched the BBC meetings we had this year would sort of know that we had a difficult time balancing this year's budget. We did. Fortunately, we got quite a bit of additional state aid, primarily Chapter 70 education funds, which allowed us to balance the budget. But even though we do have a balanced budget this year, we do have some questions long-term about sustainability. So what I'd like to do today is to give you a little bit of background, show you where we are with some of our accounts, and talk about challenges. The presentation which you're going to see is on the website. So A few slides I may go through a little quickly, because they're pretty self-explanatory, but people, again, it's on the website. So let's take a look at receipts. And I think generally this is going to be good news. So where does our revenue come from? I mean, it really should come at no surprise to people that the bulk of our revenue comes from the tax levy, with substantial portions also in state aid and in our local receipts. In looking at FY23 versus FY24, I think you're going to see some major differences in several of the accounts. Tax levy went up significantly, and the major reason for that is that the debt exclusion for the Coakley Middle School is going to come forward in fiscal '24, and we have to pay the piper then. So that's probably, a little more than $6 million worth. State aid was up significantly, which was a big savior for us this year. And again, the primary increase in state aid was Chapter 70 educational funds. And in his presentation, I think Dr. Thompson will explain, why Norwood received such a large amount of money, and it was certainly a welcome amount. What you see here for local receipts is it's sort of like a minimal change, but we have some more recent information, and the trend in local receipts is very, and I repeat, very, very positive. Just a slide on collected property taxes. Norwood does very well, even with COVID. A couple of years, we're almost at 99%. And that's considered consistently good by the rating agencies, and that's certainly a positive in terms of Norwood getting its bond rating. You look at state aid, the last 2 years, we've gone up close to $4 million in each year, and again, that's primarily Chapter 70 educational aid because of the demographics of the system, and it's certainly a welcome amount. We would have had extreme difficulties in balancing our budget without that additional state aid. So, Department of Receipts, and this is hot off the press. This came up after we had done our budget book, but it was significant enough that we wanted to bring it to people's attention. Very, very positive. Initially we thought that we were going to be, close to estimates, but, I think as you can see, Department of Receipts, we're going to have a surplus in FY23, we think of a little more than $6 million, which is great. That'll add to free cash. It'll give us a lot of flexibility. Although, as I always tell people, I do want to warn people that simply because we have money, it doesn't mean it's burning a hole in our pocket and we should spend it. We should spend this strategically and for the right projects, for the right reasons. Now, why did we have this significant increase in FY24 in Department of Receipts? There are a couple of reasons, one of which was the ambulance receipts are up. Although ambulance receipts are up, there was an increase in fire department overtime as well as wear and tear in equipment because of the longer rides they have. But from a receipt standpoint, it's up. Meals and room tax are probably at or above pre-COVID levels, which is great. Licenses and permits, that's building department. We had some huge projects, the Modernas and the Norwood Hospital contributed significant amounts of money. Investment income, that really represents the amount of money in income from the bonds that we bought last year for the Coakley Middle School. We haven't really spent that much yet, but we will start to spend it soon as construction will begin in June. But we were able to accumulate some investment income there. And even in the column that we had a large negative, the payment in lieu of taxes, some of the recent information is that we may be close to estimate there. However, we may be getting a big surplus in '24. That isn't the number we're going to get in later years. There's a couple of reasons for that. You know, we have a one-time FEMA payment of $311,000. That's for a big storm we had a couple of years ago, snowstorm. Ambulance receipts will probably go down, you know, once we're going back to Norwood Hospital rather than some of the hospitals in other communities. Building permits will be down. You're not going to get nine-figure projects like Moderna or the hospital every year, much as we'd like to. And we're not going to get the investment income because we're going to be spending down the bonds as we build more of the middle school. So in the end, maybe we're going to get a little more than $2.5 million, of a surplus, in subsequent years, which is certainly money that we have plenty of use for, no question. In terms of free cash over the years, we've had some fluctuations. It's probably in general more generally in the $5 million range, although with the surplus in Department of Receipts this year, I expect a large amount of free cash. And again, being the broken record that I am, we have to spend this wisely. Looking at our stabilization fund balances, which 10 years or so, going to FY23, consistent increase. We had a reduction in the stabilization fund in 2014. That was primarily a down payment we made on the DPW, which saved us quite a bit of money in interest down the road, and we built that back up to a little more than $8 million. The red is the override stabilization fund that we have. It's been going up. It's a good number, about $2.8 million, but I think as you can see, you will see in some subsequent slides that number is going to take a significant hit next year. I showed you this slide before when we did the special town meeting, but it's worth showing again. It's just going to show what our reserves are going to look like, assuming what we have recommended is voted for at town meeting. Free cash will, again, will take a hit, but, we will get a recertification of free cash in the fall, and I expect that number to go up big time. The other major funds I wanted to mention would be our regular stabilization fund, general stabilization fund, over $8 million, and we'd certainly like to add more to that when we can. But the override stabilization fund will take a big hit, and I think, you see a little bit later, the reasons for that. It's what we had to do to balance the budget. So let's take a look at some of our budgetary trends. Where is our budget spent? 4 major areas: general government, facilities, schools, and shared cost. The highest proportion is the schools, but we still get a significant portion for general government and for shared costs. In terms of general government, where does our money go? We have these 4 categories. The yellow is the highest. That represents public safety, which is primarily police and fire. That's around half the budget, half the general government budget. Looking at shared costs. Slide's a little bit busy, but I just wanted to emphasize 2 areas. One is the far left, which is the orange. That's our excluded debt service. That's debt service, for initially the high school in FY22 and 23, but I think you're going to see a big increase in FY24, and that's primarily related to the bonds coming due, or the payments coming due on the new Coakley Middle School project. The green, which is health insurance, keeps going up. There's really nothing we can do about it. We're at the mercy of the insurance companies. That's going up around $1 million a year, thereabouts, and we just have to absorb it in the budget. Okay, so what are the challenges facing each sector of town government? In terms of our shared cost budget, Insurance is expected to increase. That's a trend everywhere. No different in Massachusetts. As our population ages, retirement costs will go up. Debt payment, we can get some relief in debt payment if we're disciplined. You know, we certainly have to do things we have to do to preserve our infrastructure, et cetera. But again, we have to be disciplined in what we do and only go for the have-to-haves as opposed to the nice-to-have projects. And then there's OPEB, I can't remember the acronym off the top of my head, I'm sorry. But, you know, it's other post-employment benefits eventually come to me. But it's an issue that's sort of keeping us from, one of the issues keeping us from getting a AAA rating. However, though, the rating agencies, particularly Standard & Poor's, does say that Norwood is proactively addressing this, which is an important consideration, so they're giving us points for that. General government challenges, around 70% of general government is labor costs. Trash disposal contract this year, we've had a great contract for 5 years. We're going to have a new contract. It's going to go up this year, and it's probably going to go up in subsequent years too. And it will be, you know, they're looking at, you know, different vendors, and they'll pick the least costly one, but it is going to be going up. And then for regional dispatch, you know, we just went to a regional dispatch. First few years, our costs are paid for, but in the future years, we will have to come up with the cost of paying for regional dispatch. In terms of the schools, 80% of the school cost is labor, so again, that's a big consideration. And then the out-of-district special education costs. That's really been the biggest budget driver we've had in any area of government the last few years. Challenges for the facilities department, rising utility costs. Again, there's not a lot they can do about that. The costs are what they are. And they do have an aging workforce, so they'll have to look in the next few years, you know, as openings come up to sort of, you know, see whether they can get a little bit younger. All right, so in the long term, what are we looking to do? As I said before, you know, we did have a budget crunch this year. We don't want to wait until after the first of the year to begin the budget process. We want to begin the budget process now with the Budget Balancing Committee. Take a very early look at FY25 and sort of get an idea of where do we stand. Are we going to be okay, or are we going to have issues? Look at a 5-year projection, as we've done. Again, that sort of tells us where we're going to be and what we may have to do. Legitimate needs, not pie in the sky. And in particular, we want to look at long-term sustainability. We don't want to take the easy, you know, one-year solutions and say, well, that solves our problems. All that really does is solve 1 year. I think we're looking to do a long-term type of solution. And our goal is to try to avoid an operational override. I mean, to be frank, we've asked a lot of our taxpayers the last few years. And build a consensus between the school committee, selectmen, and the FinCom on how we should proceed. So for final considerations, final items, look at efficiencies within government, combining you know, school and town finance and information technology. This is something that we want to look at internally, see whether it makes sense or not. It may or it may not, but I think it's certainly something worth looking at. Try to fund a pension liability. As we stand now, we're scheduled to pay that off by 2032. And once we do that, the money that we put into pension liability, we will put into trying to fund the OPEB liability, and we have a long way to go with that. And then lastly, again, your brokered record again, funds for have-to-have versus nice-to-have projects. I really can't emphasize that greater. We have to, you know, as a town meeting and as a town, we have to show control over, you know, particularly the capital projects we have. We generally never see a bad project. They're all projects with merit. But given our financial situation, what should we fund and what should we defer? And that's it. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Slater. All right, we now go to Article 4, Motion 1. The budget will be a series of 8 motions covering different sections of the budget. The budget is detailed in Section 3 of your budget book, if you want to follow along there. The motions and the dollar amounts will be up on the screen. Mr. Slater, motion number 1.
Give me just a second, Madam Moderator. Motion number 1. Motion of the Finance Commission, motion number 1, Article 4, that the sum of $236,330 be transferred from water sewer receipts, and that the sum of $6,438,502 be raised by taxation and appropriated for the purposes indicated. All sums voted for salaries are to be expended in conformance with the official budget of the Finance Commission unless otherwise voted by the town meeting. All sums voted for new equipment shall be expended for items listed in the budgets approved by the Finance Commission and voted by the town meeting. As displayed in the budget book, restrictions by salaries totals, operating expenses totals, and capital expense totals are explicitly incorporated into the vote. Total of this motion is $6,674,836.
And Mrs. Bodenhofer, you're seconding.
Yes.
On the motion to fund general government, Mr. Slater, anything on the motion?
No, Madam Moderator.
All right. Let me open it up. All right, seeing no one. For Article 4, motion number 1, to fund general government for a total of $6,674,836. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say no. Motion carries. Mr. Slater, motion number 2 on public safety.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Motion by the FinCom, Article 4, Motion 2, that the following sums be raised by taxation and appropriated for the purposes indicated. All sums voted for salaries are to be expended in conformance with the official budget of the Finance Commission unless otherwise voted by town meeting. All sums voted for new equipment shall be expended for items listed in the budget approved by the Finance Commission and voted by the town meeting. As displayed in the budget book, restrictions by salary totals, operating expenses totals, and capital expenses totals are explicitly incorporated into this vote. Public safety total, $19,270,872.
And Mrs. Bodenhofer, once again, you're
Yes.
seconding that motion. Mr. Slater, anything on the motion?
No, Madam Moderator.
All right, and the puppy has left, so she will not be speaking on this. But I do have a registered speaker, Mrs. Dixon from District 1. She's right over there. You do.
Doris Dixon, District 1. I have a few questions, not so much comments. And most of it's relative to the loss of our dispatchers. I noticed in the NFD's information that their head count dropped. I didn't see that on the police side. In addition, we were told we would save money on losing the dispatchers, yet there's still about a 5% increase in the MPD salary budget and about 8% in the NFD, if my math is working. Could someone please explain, and where are we saving money? That's first part. Do you want me to do this in sections, or?
Well, why don't we take them? It'd probably be better to take them one at a time. Mr. Mizuko, are you going to take that?
Yes, sorry, thank you. Yes, I am, Madam Moderator. So the NFD headcount went down. The 4 dispatchers we used to staff on the fire side all opted to retire. We offered all of our dispatchers the options of either an early retirement package to they could retire if they didn't have enough time in, or to stay working for the town. We would carry them through to their normal retirement age. All 4 dispatchers on the fire side chose to retire, several of them being closer to the natural dispatch age. On the police side, we didn't have that. Several of them are staying with us. The total trend out cost over a 5-year period still shows the town saving several $100,000, but that wasn't the real driver behind the decision. The chief can speak more to some of the operational and other efficiencies and why we made the decision, but it's still showing both on the operating budget and a savings over the years. That being said, there's still cost increases at the fire department and at the police department.
Follow up, Mr. Dixon?
Can you tell us how many years we'll be receiving funding for this and how that's working? I know it's percentages as we go on. And then how much will it cost per year after that? Project.
Sure. So we receive total funding from the state for 3 fiscal years, so fiscals 24, 25, and 26. And then we begin paying, we pay 25%, then we pay 75%, then we pay 100%. Even trended out to year 6, what we'll be paying HREC is about $800,000. The current dispatch this year, if we didn't make any changes, would still be a little over $1 million. And the shift of the liability for pensions and OPEBs goes away and goes with HREC. There's some significant capital costs that aren't necessarily projected in that. That's a little bit harder to project. We know that there's a regular replacement of the E-stations and other equipment. We get some additional equipment that we couldn't say we were saving money on because it wasn't, some of it is nice stuff that we wouldn't necessarily purchase anyway, so not factoring that in, it's still showing out 6 or 7 years at a lower cost. But again, it was more about the efficiency and what we gain, especially with some changes the state had made to the 911 system over the years that led to our call volume going up. But if you had questions about those, the chief would be more than happy to answer them.
Do you have another question, Mr. Dixon?
Sorry.
That's okay.
So how many dispatchers are we keeping for approximately how long, and who will be sitting at the front desk? Also, somebody told me that Mr. Town Manager said at a selectmen's meeting we were hiring 4 additional officers to take police reports. Could you please reply to that?
Absolutely. So as part of the overall transition, we did hire 4 police officers to man the police station. We still have walk-ins to the station. And the challenge being right now, and again, we're in the middle of the transition, so let's say this time last year, if you went in to file a police report, we have to pull somebody off the road to fill that police report. Not an ideal situation. The dispatchers also end up handling prisoner watch, and there's a different dynamic of making sure that a trained police officer with their skills is actually handling that situation. So there are 4 officers that are still required to cover the station. Smaller and rural communities go to dark stations. We are not in a situation where that would make sense for us, where you basically show up and pick up a phone and call somebody. That wouldn't work for Norwood, so we know we had to make that adjustment. I believe 4 of the police dispatchers at this point in time have indicated that they want to, 3 have indicated that they want to stay and just finish out their careers naturally. So they'll still work likely at the police department, or we'll transfer them to other departments. But that was part of our commitment to our employees, that this wasn't just about let's gut the workforce and save a couple bucks. There's future trends that we need to be able to align to. There's additional capital costs. This makes operational sense. We're not as interested in making sure we save every dollar. We wanted to make sure we took care of our employees, and several of them opted to just continue working until their natural retirement age.
Follow up?
Sorry, the last part of it was, and I thought I asked it, who's going to be sitting at that front desk?
Once we are fully transitioned, you'll have a police officer there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. Anything else? Mr. Brody?
Steve Brody, District 4. Thank you, Madam Moderator. Now, the crossing button at the corner of Washington Street and Manhattan Street in front of the church, the one that's opposite St. Catherine's, doesn't work at all and needs to be repaired because there is no button. And one has to wait for the whole cycle to complete before the walk light comes on.
Hey, Mr. Brody, what does this have to do with the budget?
Well, okay, I guess it doesn't.
It kind of doesn't, yeah. All right, but the town manager is going to address it anyway, because he's a nice guy.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Through you to Mr. Brody, we will issue a work order to have that looked at right away. The whole downtown traffic system is scheduled for replacement in the next year or two. It's an entirely integrated system. It is aging. It's a little over 40 years old, so the whole system is scheduled for replacement, but we will make sure to put in a work order for that.
Mr. Greeley.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Joe Greeley, District 6. Relative to the fire budget specifically, I'm just kind of reiterating and commenting, more a comment than a question about something that Chairman Slater said the other night relative to a surprise that came out of the FY23 and the FY23 budget and the impact that that has not only on FY23 but also in FY24 and possibly in out years. Speaking as a town meeting member and I guess a former finance commission member, we expect, like, we rely on the boards sitting across the front of the room. And honestly, and with all due respect, if there's any surprises or last minute news that hits those boards, we rely on those boards to collaborate together, communicate together, and come up with as good a solution as possible, which I'm sure now has happened. But just the word, I kind of perked up when I heard the word surprise, because the last thing an accountant wants to hear is the word surprise. And and again, it's just a comment, it's not a question. But from a town meeting member standpoint, we rely, I'll say all of you, but when I say that, in all due respect to all the boards, we rely on the boards to collectively be upfront, communicative, collaborative, and identify issues, whether they're positive or negative, as soon as possible. We know that this is, personally I know, but we all know that this is not something that's done on the back of the napkin, and personally I know that the budget cycle it'll start next week for next year. So we know it takes a lot of time. There's certainly a lot of moving parts, but just the word surprise caught me by surprise. And subsequent to that word, I also heard and wrote down the word we, and I think that we need to be collaborative about that word, we, and it has to be like any news, as I said, positive or negative, has to be communicated across all parties as respectfully and as soon as possible. So I do feel the pain. I don't know all the details that went into what Mr. Slater had commented about the other day. I'm probably better off that I don't know, but I just, my point is we rely on the boards, and we need to know what you know as much as possible. So I appreciate the fact that there is a solution in front of us. This book has a balanced budget that's been presented, and we do appreciate that. If there's anything that we need to know that's, there's a hiccup or a roadblock or a bump in the road or whatever, the more we know, we as town meeting members and frankly as representatives of the community, the more we know, the better, and the more we can act in a knowledgeable, respectful, and collaborative manner. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Greeley. Ms. Sobchak? Ron, just so you know, I don't think this is, the speaker up here is on. Thank you. Mrs. Sobchak?
Amy Sobchak, District 4. Through you, Madam Moderator. In regards to the fire department budget, I know that there was a hiccup in it, and I just am curious if the request is definitely including the increases that are, the negotiated increases, as well as I know we just promoted 4 lieutenants, so I'm hoping that that includes their pay increases. And also, In regards to the overtime and recall budget, I'm looking at a budgeted of $120,000. 2022 was actual of 147. We had some issues already. We had to move money for the overtime budget. So I'm wondering why our request for 2024 is only $130,000. How realistic is that?
Mr. Mizuka?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. To answer the second question first, the money we moved was for substitution. That's replacing firefighters when they're out on duty. That overtime recall line is generally a much smaller line that doesn't tend to run into the same fluctuations where you have a long-term injury and you're replacing somebody for 4 or 5 months. Chief Hayes prepared the initial financials for the FY24 budget. Chief Wright came in and verified them, and we've looked at them. We believe they accurately reflect what's in the contract for FY24. Numbers like substitution are very challenging. Again, one injury one way or another where somebody's out for 3 or 6 months, and sometimes it's not just an injury, it may be just a long-time illness. It's hard to project exactly where that number is going to land.
Mr. Sobchak, follow?
And also, just curious, the significant, almost $200,000 increase in the EMT pay?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So there's a couple of components to that. Previously, we had a unique system at the fire department only where not every paramedic was actually paid as a paramedic. And on the one hand, it was really actually the only system in town we have that way. Teachers receive a degree stipend regardless. Police receive a degree stipend. There's a general government degree stipend. DPW workers, for instance, receive a certain amount for having a CDL, even if they're not driving a CDL. We had a pretty complicated system where you were a basic EMT riding or non-riding, a paramedic or riding or non-riding. We've corrected that system, which we probably should have corrected a while ago, where our paramedics are getting paid, if they're willing to work on the ambulance, the paramedic rate. And that's important for retention, it's important for attracting new employees. It was probably a long time coming. Unfortunately, what that means is we did have, in some cases, 10 or 12 people who were getting a small stipend that now get a much larger stipend. But that's what we need to run our paramedic service. Part of increasing that cost has allowed us to offer 2 ALS ambulances, which actually comes with some revenue offsets on the other side. But as much as it was just a negotiated settlement, it was also correcting something that was really a fairly inequitable system of compensating folks.
Thank you.
Anything else on motion 2? All right, seeing none, let's put it to a vote. For the public safety budget, a total of $19,278,772. This would be a majority vote. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. Motion carries. Article 4, Motion 3, Mr. Slater, Public Works.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Article 4, Motion 3, motion by the Finance Commission, that the sum of $125,000 be transferred from cemetery receipts from the sale of lots and graves fund 4901, that the sum of $496,150 be transferred from water sewer receipts, and that the sum of $8,186,677 be raised by taxation and appropriated for the purposes indicated. All sums voted for salaries are to be expended in conformance with the official budget of the Finance Commission unless otherwise voted by the town meeting. All sums voted for new equipment shall be expended for items listed in the budgets approved by the Finance Commission and voted by the town meeting. As displayed in the budget book, restrictions by salary totals, operating expenses totals, and capital expense totals are explicitly incorporated into this vote. Public Works total, $8,807,827.
And Mrs. Bodenhofer is seconding.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Slater, anything on? All right, Ms. Dixon, I think I have you registered on this one as well.
Doris Dixon, District 1. I just have 2 questions. Do we have the road list published on the website? We discussed doing this a couple of years ago. So it would be helpful if we have the road list on it, meaning the list of roads to be fixed this year. That's one. And the second one is, can we have an explanation of the new disposal contract, please?
All right, Mr. Mizuko, you're taking both?
Yes, thank you, Madam Moderator. We will get the road list on the website this week. I always put the caveat that we list the roads we intend to do. There are operational decisions made sometimes up until when we're actually paving the road, whether we have to do it or delay it for a different year. As for the new waste contract, we haven't finalized a signed waste contract. Unfortunately, we're probably looking at north of a 50% increase over 5 years, probably 10% this year, and I think the next subsequent years are going to be 15% or so. We have solicited quotes from other vendors, even though we like Waste Management and they do a great job. I wouldn't say we like Waste Management, we like the job that they do. And they're good to work with in terms of working with them as a vendor. The other quotes we've got have been comparable to their price. And we've spoken with a number of other communities throughout eastern Massachusetts that are all facing similar increases. We did for many years have a provision in our contract where the recycling costs wouldn't exceed trash. We're probably paying a little bit of the cost of that over time, that we had a very good provision in there that Waste Management many times asked us if we would want to take out, and we kept saying no. It's not uncommon for Waste Management to approach communities in the middle of a contract and let them know that their costs are going up and to ask for an adjustment to their contract. Some communities do that. We have resolutely said absolutely not each time. A contract is a contract. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're not thrilled with that, but we have to make good business decisions for the town. That being said, it's a cost increase we're seeing in every town across the Commonwealth, unfortunately.
Is there a follow-up, Mr. Dixon?
Short. I think I saw that there's a $204,000 increase. Is that where you think it's going to be?
For the first year, about 10%, and then higher in subsequent years, unfortunately.
So is recycling going to cost more than trash?
It could. We never know.
The contract right now, what does it look like?
It's still always a floating rate, but it's not going to be a positive couple of years. And we're worried about the downstream impacts of recycling possibly costing more. The state has also added and enhanced their waste ban, which just changes what we're able to dispose of and how we're able to dispose of it. And not to say that that's a bad thing, but that at times comes with additional costs as well.
Thanks.
Okay, Ms. Dixon, I think you could just hand the microphone to Mr. McFarland across from you.
Hi, Peter McFarland, District 4. We talk about streets paving. What's the rationale from when the sidewalks get done? Because we're seeing some streets where the sidewalks are asphalt and the streets, I can remember last year Cedar Street was done and the sidewalks were just as bad, probably in worse shape than the street. And they weren't touched, so I don't know what the rationale is as far as that goes. Thanks.
Mr. Mizuko?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Mr. Ryan can explain the process that we use for what sidewalks get what treatment.
Madam Moderator, so our main focus is to take care of the streets. We select the streets to be paved, and then we walk the streets to see what sidewalks are really in bad shape. We're not replacing them all. We just can't. Our real focus is on street resurfacing. So if we go to a street like, I'm going to say Prospect Street last year, we walked quite a bit of it. It was in terrible shape. A lot of concrete had failed, it heaved. And we decided, rather than piecemeal it, we replace the whole thing. The focus on this whole street resurfacing plan is street resurfacing. If sidewalks are in really bad shape, we'll take care of it. If they're in okay shape, then we're going to leave them alone, but fix them in spots. But it's just not enough money to take care of the streets and the sidewalks, because the street resurfacing is the main focus.
Follow-up, Mr. McFarland, or you good? Good, thank you. Mr. Hearn?
Madam Moderator, David Hearn, District 4. I don't see it here, but I'm wondering, is this a section where we're dealing with water and sewer system? Or is that later? Where is it?
Later.
I'm trying to find
That's
it in the
later.
list.
Yeah,
Thank you.
later.
I'll save it for later then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hearn. All right, motion 3, let's put it to a vote. For public funds, a total of $8,807,827. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Motion carries. Article 4, Motion 4, Mr. Slater, Health and Human Services.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Article 4, motion for, motion by the Finance Commission, that the following sums be raised by taxation and appropriated for the purposes indicated. All sums voted for salaries are to be expended in conformance with the official budget of the Finance Commission unless otherwise voted by the town meeting. All sums voted for new equipment shall be expended for items listed in the budgets approved by the Finance Commission and voted by the town meeting. As displayed in the budget book, restrictions by salary totals, operating expenses totals, and capital expenses totals are explicitly incorporated into the vote. Health and Human Services total, $1,518,325.
And Ms. Bodenhopper, once again, you're seconding. Thank you very much. Mr. Slater, anything on the motion? Nope. And we do have one registered speaker, Ms. Dixon, District 1.
Doris Dixon, District 1. All of these questions have to do with animal control. Much of this is the status of the partnership with Walpole. I'm wondering how that's going from both a technical perspective and a financial perspective, including the vehicles. The hiring of a third ACO to replace the one who left? And what about the potential partnership with Westwood? Are there details that can be shared?
All right, Mr. Mizuko is going to take that, and I think Ms. Lane is at the ready if need be.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. From a technical and a financial standpoint, it's working well. Several years ago, we set out to share 3 ACOs between Norwood and Walpole. It's difficult in any community to find an animal control officer and somebody who's willing to do the work. It's further challenging that it is effectively a 24-hour service, but nobody can really afford to permanently staff 24 hours. So the model we have now, we have 2 effectively during the day, and we have somebody on in the evenings when we're fully staffed between the 2 towns. That has worked out well. Currently, Walpole, we had a vehicle, Walpole had a vehicle, and we were sort of sharing whoever had a third available vehicle, but they would usually use the second vehicle, Walpole's. Walpole's truck was a bit older than ours and has been taken out of service. They have in their capital plan this year to purchase a truck for next year. So the arrangement, if you will, has we have a truck and Walpole has a truck. We'll probably have to replace ours, not for another 5 or 6 years. I think it's only about 4 or 5 years old. So that's working out. We set out to at some point build a larger regional animal control outfit, if for no other reason than when you lose an ACO and you have just one, it becomes a significant burden on the community to try to figure out how to staff it, how to find people. You're grabbing somebody in a department that is really, it's part of the health department, but it's really a department of one. Other people don't have the training and the skill set. You're bringing somebody in, hoping you can train them. So a larger regional model that ends up being 5 or 6 or 7 towns with, call it 10 ACOs, at least lets you have some depth, it lets you have a bench, and it makes sure that we can always provide some sort of a service, because when there is a problem, we don't want to not have somebody to call. Some towns rely on their police department to do that. That wouldn't work here in Norwood, given our service commitment and given what we have to handle on the police side. We've talked with Westwood. They're interested in joining with us. I don't know if that'll happen at this time. They, couple of concerns there. One being, whereas we're down 1 ACO, now is not the time for us to say, sure, let's make our region even bigger. They may go with another community. Doesn't exclude that from happening down the road as we look to build out the service, but as everyone knows, it's hard to find staff in a lot of departments, not just in the town, but in the private sector. So it's sort of, we get fully staffed and then we get people trained, and it's like we want to kind of hold there for a while and just breathe before we look to grow it from there.
Follow up, Ms. Dixon?
Yes. What is the status of the hiring of the third?
So we're in the interview process.
The next part of my question is, and this kind of all goes together, what is the process for ACO dispatch? On Norwood now, there are a lot of people who post, and frequently the information is just not accurate and it's a mess. Who are people to call when there is a dog bite, a runaway dog, a missing dog or cat? Is it the animal control phone number? Is it the NPD non-emergency number?
So I'll have the health director come up and give you a detailed explanation, but posting to social media is never the answer when you have a question or need a town service. So that's definitely a number one. Number two, you can always alert us to lost animals. It is not the town's responsibility to look for lost animals. We don't budget for that. We don't staff for that. There's no statutory background for that. I know it's heartbreaking when an animal has gone missing, and you can always let us know. We do not deploy staff to look for missing animals. We're really not supposed to be doing that. Generally, the ACO number is the number to call if you have an issue. If you can't get through, you can call the MPD non-emergency line. They'll make sure that they get somebody there.
All right. And again, Ms. Dixon, I'm letting that one go because we're talking about their budget.
But this is part of the budget relative to the whole program with Walpole and Westwood. In that justification for police and fire, we have counts on incidents, and I'm wondering if we maintain counts to justify these services that could also be shared with the town.
Absolutely. I believe they're actually shared with the Board of Health either quarterly or monthly. We keep track of the number of calls and the types of responses. I can tell you it has increased since the pandemic. And if we had 5 animal control officers, we could probably keep 5 of them busy. Remember, it's a 24/7 service that I wish all the calls would come in Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4. They never do. Sometimes it's 2 o'clock on a Saturday. Sometimes it's a Sunday. Sometimes it's a holiday. Nobody wants a bat in their house on Christmas, and unfortunately that happens sometimes. So it's tough to staff a 24/7 operation with just 1 person or 2 people or 3 people. One of the reasons we're trying to go to a regional model is to make sure that somebody's always available to respond. For years, Henry, our animal control officer, would almost always respond. He went a 4 or 5 year period without being able to take vacation. I mean, we can't have staff doing that where they're just 1 person is on call, and they get called out quite a bit. It's not uncommon for the day ends at 4:30, Henry drives in his truck and gets home, 4:45 there's a call, he's gonna go do something. We're trying to build out the service to make sure we always have something available, because you lose 1 critical person in an operation like that, and we're at a real standstill.
You're all set, Ms. Dixon?
Can I add one more portion that's definitely financially driven? You talked about getting calls after hours. How do we reimburse these folks who are working 24/7 versus the police department or the fire department?
Sure, so their contract contains provisions, whether it's they're on standby and a minimum amount of overtime based on the time of day and the time of the call. So they receive standby, and they may receive overtime depending on what actually happens.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor?
Jean Taylor, District 8. I'd first like to thank Stacy and commend her, Stacy Lane, for the great job she does with the Board of Health. When I served on the board, I believe we had 7, I could be wrong, could have been 6, people under that department. I would like to know, I think it's 15 that we have, but if she could answer that for me. And the second question would be, because we have that many now under the Board of Health, is it possible at all that somewhere along the line we could add a sanitarian for the inspection of the restaurants? We have so many in Norwood, and I think he does a fantastic job, as does the board. But I think it would be very helpful in the department if we could possibly do that and keep the budget within a reasonable amount. Thank you, Stacy.
Ms. Lane, you want to take that? Thank you.
Good evening. Stacy Lane, Superintendent Director of the Health Department. So we have 5 that are staff that are budgeted before this body. Then we do have some regional staff that are shared services, similar to what we do with Walpole. It's grant funded. One of the grants is a 10-year grant through the Department of Public Health. There's another one that ends in a year. We have a drug-free communities grant that has an employee. We also have a mental health awareness grant that's another employee. So those are not funded before this body, but right now, Jean, it is only, sorry, Madam Moderator, there are only 5 people funded by this budget.
May I?
Follow up, Ms. Taylor?
But they fall under the Board of Health and they fall under your jurisdiction.
Yes, that is correct.
I commend you.
Thank
It's
you.
a lot of work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Mr. Hopcroft?
Francis Hopcroft, District 1. I noticed under the operating expenses for the Board of Health that we've typically had hazardous waste program listed, and it seems to have disappeared. Can somebody tell me where it went?
Even I know the answer to that one, but I'll let you
That's
answer it,
good. That
Mr.
makes two
Mizuko.
people better.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. The program has been moved over to the DPW's responsibility, so that line has left the Health Department's budget and moved over to the DPW's budget. The DPW will be managing the program from now on. The Board of Health had requested that the DPW or another department take over the management of the program.
Sounds like Mr. Hopcroft has another question.
The question then was, where in that budget did it show up? I went through that budget and didn't see it there. It makes sense it should go there.
It's in the DPW budget. I can look for the exact line if you'd like.
Well, if it's in this book on the right line, I'll find it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Hopcroft's up for the challenge. Thank you. All right. Seems to be no other hands, so I'm sorry. Mr. Hall, I'm so sorry.
John Hall, District 6. Through you, Madam Moderator, this is really for this department, but also for other departments. 50 years ago, I was working at the Urban Institute where we were developing effectiveness measures for different departments. And what occurs to me as we watch each of these presentations is that when someone has a question, how well is it working? What you get back as an answer is, we think it's working well. There's no data. There's no interpretation of data. And there could be. In the food safety program that we were just talking about, there's a description of how many inspections they conducted. Those are activity measures. How does it compare with the number of sites that might be inspected? How does it compare with the inspection practices of other similar towns? These sorts of things, if they're made part of the regular reporting, either to the departments or to the town meeting, can be drivers of changes in priorities for programs, changes in budgets, which is what we're here about. And I'd just like to suggest that people look into that. If anybody's interested in pursuing it and isn't quite sure how to begin, I've got a reading list.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Anyone else? All right, we'll put it to a vote. This is Article 4, Motion 4 for Health and Human Services for $1,518,325. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. Motion carries. Article 4, Motion 5 on Culture and Recreation. Mr. Slater.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Article 4, Motion 5, moved by the Finance Commission, that the following sums be raised by taxation and appropriated for the purposes indicated. All sums voted for salaries are to be expended in conformance with the official budget of the Finance Commission unless otherwise voted by the town meeting. All sums voted for new equipment shall be expended for items listed in the budgets approved by the Finance Commission and voted by the town meeting. As displayed in the budget book, restrictions by salaries, totals, operating expenses totals, and capital expenses totals are explicitly incorporated into the vote. Culture and recreation total, $3,037,308.
And again, Mrs. Bodenhofer is seconding that. Mr. Slater, I'm assuming nothing on the motion. And Ms. Quinn.
Thank you. Sarah Quinn, District 2. I'm intrigued by the $20,000 increase in the 4th of July fund. I'm wondering what we can expect for that. significant sum.
Mr. Mizuko, you want to take that, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Moderator. For many years, we have under budgeted the cost of the 4th of July parade. It routinely exceeds $50,000 or $60,000. We try to make it covered up with donations. That's becoming much more difficult. We've unfortunately just left this line flat for far too long. We're now roughly going to cover maybe 2/3 of the cost of the budget for the 4th of July parade. We'll need to increase this line probably again next year so we can generally cover the parade. And the committee will continue to do fundraising work. They do a lot of fundraising and raise funds, but the parade is just a significant expense. We're probably going to need to increase some of the concert lines in a few years. Again, those costs are going up like everything else, and we always sort of hold this line where it is. But in order to continue having a good parade and being realistic about the fundraising expectations that the committee can have, we're going to need to contribute a little bit more. It's been 20 grand for a long time, and parades are very expensive.
Unpopular opinion, but have we thought about scaling back at all? It seems like some of these fall in the nice to have, not need to have bucket.
I don't believe, my own opinion, if I could, Madam Moderator, I don't believe we should scale back the parade. I think the parade committee does a great job putting together a fantastic parade. People look forward to it, and for the cost we spend, I think we get an awful lot out of it.
Thank you. Well,
hi, Madam Moderator. Trish Monahan, District 8. I have a question on the library budget. We lost 12 people in the last 2 years, but we're looking to expand the hours in the budget for it. I'm just wondering if we have the staff available to work those extra hours, and also where we stand on filling those jobs. Thank you.
thank you. Mr. Mizuko, are you going to have Mr. Cheever take?
I will start, and then Mr. Cheever will answer. I believe you're referring to the decrease in the part-time positions line. So that was the consolidation of some part-time positions into more part-time positions. We had some folks that were 4 hours, 5 hours a week, so we might have, not kicking them into benefited territory, but at some point, 3 people working 4 hours a week became a person working 12 hours a week. I'll defer to Director Cheever on the specifics of the library operations.
That's exactly. Thank you, Mr. Mizuko. That is exactly what happened. We had some part-time people who retired and who chose to, who just stepped away. We had 3 people who were working part-time and were benefited part-time that we actually moved into full-time, so had already been paying their benefits and we were able to better support them and they better support us, so we increased those hours. We are currently looking for a generous librarian, and I'm working with the HR department to hire another assistant for the circulation department to help us with those. And we think with those, with some additional part-time help that we're currently looking for right now, we'll be able to meet the additional hours. The hours that we're looking to expand are Saturdays in July and August and Sundays between Memorial Day and Columbus Day. We currently cover 7 days a week the rest of the year. So it's really a matter of taking the existing staff and figuring out how to juggle things for those couple extra months, really. Using a rotation where when somebody works on a Saturday, they take a day off during the week, and we just are able to cover things that way.
Yeah, go ahead.
We have enough people to cover these hours, or are we going to leave departments short? Are we going to be overworking people and pushing the limits on everything?
We are currently working to have the number of people. We are looking for some part-time help right now. Once we fill the positions that we're looking for, we will have the people that we need. And we're working closely with Union to make sure that we're not stressing anybody out or overworking anyone.
And one more, please. Okay. Where do we stand on those jobs, on filling those jobs?
We have one posted right now, and we're working on one other, and then we have somebody who's retiring at the end of May. So we'll be posting that once she has retired.
Thank you. Mr. Greeley.
Joe Greeley, District 6. Relative to the celebrations line, just follow up on that. People always say the town is turning into a city and it's lost the flavor and the feel of kind of what everybody harkens back to, the whatever period you want to harken back to as far as Norwood goes. I think the celebrations line, as Mr. Mizuko said, I think that's one of the things that the town does a great job of combating, that cityness. I think my favorite happens to be Memorial Day, but I'm unbiased. I think the Carillon concert and everything on the Common is great. And, you know, as we saw last year with the, even though it wasn't in the budget, but the Norwood 150 and many donors contributed to bringing the pops to the town. I think all those things make Norwood kind of magic. And I would certainly, want to retain as much of that magic as we can to combat what everybody thinks, oh no, we're turning into a city, and you just turn to line 692 and you say, this is what we're doing about it. I do want to ask a question though, and this is obviously it's a loaded question, but if people in the community or anybody wanted to donate to any one of these celebrations, where would they send the money and who would they get in touch with? Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Bazooka?
Thank you. There's a couple of options. There's some buttons on the town's website that you can go to if you want to donate electronically. You can always bring a check into town hall or mail it to town hall, and just somewhere in the subject line you can put it to 4th of July concert, 4th of July parade, or summer concerts, and get it to the treasurer's office, and it'll get deposited to those accounts.
Thank
and
you,
we
Mr.
appreciate it
Musso.
when people do that.
Thank you. All right, seeing no other, oh no, I see a hand in the middle back section.
Thank you. Amy D., District 3, through you, Madam Moderator. Is there, what's the reason we're expanding the library hours? I think Norwood Library is open more hours than our towns, surrounding towns. Is there a need and how much is that actually going to cost additionally to do that?
Director Cheever, do you want to take that, or are we going to have Mr. Mizzou? You're right here. Why not? Right. Use the mic.
So we are, most of the year we're open 7 days a week. And we've been looking at our circulation data and seeing that we are seeing the most activity per the hour on the Saturdays and Sundays that we're open. We do see that steps off when we reopen on Sundays in the fall. It doesn't, people don't remember that we're open on Sundays, and there's always a bit of a lag. So there's a perception that we're not open, and we're paying for staff. So what we're looking to do is to provide consistent hours year round, so people have a resource at the times they're available. When we look at the use of the library, that's why we feel it's justified. There used to be a perception that everybody left Norwood in the summertime, and that's simply not the case. We have busy people in the library all summer long. It's also, we've been a heating and cooling center at times, and especially at times when people are vulnerable in the summertime and may need a little extra cooling, to have those Saturdays and Sunday hours available will provide that extra relief. I can't really speak to how our neighbors are responding or dealing with their communities, really just responding to Norwood's needs. The funds that we have available and that we've worked with the committees will be sufficient to provide those. We have also had conversations with the union and have in the works to do a memorandum of understanding for how we're going to impact and look at some holiday time to make sure that it is commensurate and we are compensating people and being able to juggle. We're looking at closing over the Memorial and Labor Day weekends, which we are currently closed with this, and continuing being closed so that we're consistent with the rest of town holidays, and we are also able to respect staff and their families and need to spend time and have that personal time. Does that sufficiently answer the question?
Yeah, I just, I'm not knocking the library, I love the library. I just, if we're tightening up, if it's a necessity for right now, that's all. But thank you.
Thank you. Oh, good. Yep, good. Thank you. Anything further? All right, not seeing anything, so let's, Article 4, Motion 5, let's put it to a vote. For Culture and Recreation, $3,037,308. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Motion carries. I'm only a banker, I don't know how to read numbers. Also, Mr. Hopcroft, breaking news, the hazardous waste budget is on line 341 of the budget book. Okay. That takes us to motion 6, shared costs. Mr. Slater.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Article 4, Motion 6, motion by the Finance Commission that the sum of $106,700 be transferred from the water and sewer receipts, and that $50,184,332 be raised by taxation and appropriated for the purposes indicated. All sums voted for salaries are to be expended in conformance with the official budget of the Finance Commission unless otherwise voted by town meeting. All sums voted for new equipment shall be expended for items listed in the budgets approved by the Finance Commission and voted by the town meeting. As displayed in the budget book, restrictions by salaries totals, operating expenses totals, and capital expenses totals are explicitly incorporated into this vote. Shared cost total, $50,291,032.
And Mrs. Bodenhofer is again seconding that.
Yes.
Anything on the motion, Mr. Slater? I do have one registered speaker, Ms. Dixon, District 1.
Doris Dixon, District 1. The houses that we bought in South Norwood, were they debt service? Thank you. Can you tell me how much we wound up borrowing, and did we buy 2 or did we buy 3?
Mr. Mizuko?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. We purchased 2 homes this past fall at town meeting. I'd have to check back on what the exact appropriation was. 1.9 million, somewhere 1.5 maybe for both houses. I think it was maybe 950 for one and 680 for the other. And there was money included in the appropriation for the tear down of the houses as well.
Okay, thank you. The rest of this is just a comment. Chairman Lane, thank you for helping the 2 families find somewhere to live and making sure they had the money to be able to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. Mr. Brody?
Steve Brody, District 4. I noticed what's missing, line 830, the state assessment and charges and the county assessments. You explained that when we don't have to pay any money to the county and the state?
Mr. Mizuko has that one, Mr. Brody.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Through you to the members. I wish we did not have to pay the state or the county. Unfortunately, we have been told not to raise that as an expense. It comes out of our state aid. So the state determines we get a certain total amount of state aid, and then they deduct from that the cost of the county, the cost of regional mosquito control, and a couple of the MBTA. I always remind everyone we lose. You could argue it's not a loss, about $600,000 a year to pay for the privilege of having the tea in the town, but that all comes off state aid. We just have been told not to show it as an expense, not to raise it as an expense.
Follow up, Mr. Brody?
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Sopchak?
Hi, Amy Sobchak, District 4. Just a quick question on health insurance. I recognize that it's out of control. That's a negotiated shared cost between employee and town or employer?
Mr. Mizuko?
Thank you. Yes, but it's a little bit of a different negotiation. So under state statute, we have to come to an agreement with effectively all of our unions and our retirees on any changes we would make to health insurance. And we're members of the GIC, which is the state pool, so it's the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, all of their employees, and I think there's 60 or 70 municipal partners. So we lose a little bit of control in terms of what the rates are and our ability to impact plan change design. That's really done by the Group Insurance Commission as a whole. This year, we averaged about a 7% increase in rates, which was, again, statewide. It's been higher than it's been in years. It's averaging around 5 or sub 5, but when the town did switch to the GIC, I think around 10 years ago, we were able to save, I think that year alone was a little over $1 million, and that has persisted. So it still makes financial sense to join the GIC and to stay in the GIC.
Sure. I I'm sure that's the case. Is what currently is the percentage that the town pays per employee? What is their cost? Like what, 25, 10?
The town pays about 80%. We're statutorily required to pay we can't pay less than 50%, not that we would, but we're at about 80-20. There's a couple 72 and 82 plans, but the average is 80-20.
And is that the industry norm? Is that like the municipality norm?
It's all over the place. Interestingly enough, wealthier towns tend to pay for less of a share of health insurance, which I find fascinating. It ranges anywhere from 70 to 80 to 90. I don't think there's any towns left paying 100%, but 80% on the higher end of average, but not by much, maybe by 5%.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I saw a hand in the back. Yes, ma'am. Runner will come to you.
Hi, Linda Rao, District 3. We're just trying, this is probably silly, but it says Article 4, Motion 6, but shared costs in the budget book is number 7. So all of them have been like that. Yeah, no, number 3.
Sorry.
Yeah, the numbers are off on all of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
This
we're
is
up
us.
here flipping around up here.
Yeah, it just makes it a little bit more confusing, but the motions are the motions, the numbering doesn't, the number of the motion doesn't really matter, but thank you for pointing that out, Ms. Rao. I know you're pointing to someone, I'm trying to figure out who you're pointing to. Yes, sir, in the way in the back, let's keep the runner going there.
Thank you. Jordan Thatcher, District 1. I'm looking at line 906, the snow, ice, sand, salt. There was a $70,000 increase from 2022 to 2023, and then another increase in 24. I don't know that we had any snow in the past year. Did we have any savings from that large budget increase?
Mr. Mizuko.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So just to make sure everyone's clear, that line is for snow and ice removal and at the school department. The costs are going up for both the contracted services and the supplies. Any money that's unexpended from that, if there were any money left, would go down or would return to free cash at the end of the year. On the town side, we did not spend our whole snow and ice budget. We still had to increase it to try to keep track with the actual costs that we're going to incur. We had a relatively mild winter. In a really bad winter, we don't budget enough to cover snow and ice. We have to fund it as a deficit at the end of the year.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to give him a running start, Mr. Greeley, but you can probably stand up. He's pretty quick.
Joe Greeley, District 6. I do apologize. I turned the page and in the past, we used to have either a couple of pages or maybe one consolidated page for all the committees in town. And I turned the page to this all other category and I didn't see it here. So question number 1 is, I'm sorry if I did, but did I miss funding for like admin support of various committees? And then the second question more specifically, I was interested to find out, and I was going to ask the question with the light department, but the light department and the cable group, but specifically what the status of the cable commission is. So 2 questions if I could, please.
So I think the costs that Mr. Greeley is talking about are in the general government budget, but I'll let Mr. Mizuko.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. We maintain a $4,000 line actually in the Community Development Department for all other boards and committees. It really doesn't get spent most years, but if the Historic Commission needed something printed, or if the Trails Commission needed something small, not something expensive like benches, that's where we take that line out of. And we check it every year. It's just not a whole lot of it gets expended. The Cable Commission, Town Meeting Member Mr. Shea is still working with the Cable Commission. I believe the contract with Norwood Light has been signed, and we still are waiting on Verizon and Comcast. Both of them made up. What's that? Verizon was signed, I'm sorry. So then it's just up for Comcast as the next cycle.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Shea, do you want to add to that?
Richard Shea, District 1, and also Cable Commission Chair. Basically, the line item is budgeted because occasionally we need to use a lawyer. There are specialized lawyers for contract negotiations, with the cable companies. Most years, we don't need that, but it's just there in case it needs to get done, which it does occasionally. I'm not exactly sure how much actually gets spent on the lawyer's bill, because I'm not even sure where it ends up, but it's there in case we need it.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. Anything else on shared costs? Ms. Jacobs?
Joan Jacobs, District 1. I just wanted to ask Mr. Shea about the Cable Commission, how often they meet, and what's going on with the secretary, please.
Okay, I'm going to allow this, but we're really kind of going like way off. Can you answer that very quickly, Mr. Shea? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure you two can get together after and have a discussion on this. Anything else on the shared cost budget? All right, seeing none, let's put it to a vote. Motion 6, shared costs for $50,291,032. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. Motion carries. All right, motion 7, why don't we do this? Does the school committee want to come down now, or let Mr. Slater give the motion first and then you'll come down? All right. All right, they're coming. Why don't we hold up a second? And everybody, if anybody needs to stand for a second, I do, to just take a stretch while the school committee comes down, and we'll have the next motion. The 7th motion stretch. See, you got it. All right. The 7th motion stretch is over. All right. Mr. Slater? Article 4, Motion 7 for education.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Article 4, Motion 7, motion by the Finance Commission, that the following sums be raised by taxation and appropriated for the purposes indicated. All sums voted for salaries are to be expended in conformance with the official budget of the Finance Commission unless otherwise voted by the town meeting. All sums voted for new equipment shall be expended for items listed in the budget approved by the Finance Commission and voted by the town meeting. Education total, $54,824,884.
And Ms. Bodenhofer, you are seconding. Mr. Slater, I think you have something on the motion?
I do, Madam Moderator. The slide is in your package. In this particular article, as I said, we're voting the $54 million number, but there are several other one-time items that are included in the overall school budget for a total of $58,153,567. Now, we're not voting on all of these. The ESSER grant, the circuit breaker reserve, and the miscellaneous offsets. So these are internal offsets from the school department that have already been incorporated into their budget, and their budget numbers reflect this. The free cash and the override stabilization, we will be voting those in subsequent articles to this, and those two items are necessary for the school budget to be whole. Now, this funding approach was recommended by the Budget Balancing Commission, which, as you know, consists of members of the Finance Commission, the Selectmen, and the School Committee. And as I said, this was recommended by them, and this budget, all the numbers in this budget were endorsed by the Finance Commission. Thank you.
All right, and Dr. Thompson, I think you have a presentation.
Thank you, Madam Moderator.
And we all know who you are, but please tell us again.
Dave Thompson, and I have the honor of being the superintendent of the Norwood Public Schools. So before I start, I would like to recognize one of my key staff members who's going to be retiring, Dr. Alec Wyeth, after 12 years of service. 13 years, it only seems like 11. 13 years of service as our assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction. He'll be retiring the end of June. And I just wanted to recognize him. He is here today, and thank him for his service. Okay, so here we go. Make sure I push the right button. Okay, so our budget, $54,824,886. We're going to do a little analysis of the budget first. So looking at this, these are our instructional our general fund budget by the DESE function codes. These are required by the state of Massachusetts. They're a little bit different than the town codes, but if you look at that, you can see that instructional services is our largest section of the budget. That's 81.25%. That's where you want your tax money and your other money going, is directly to the classroom to serve our students. District leadership, that would be superintendent, school committee, and finance department, is only 2.82%. Operations and management of plant, that number has actually shrunk over the last couple of years because of the combined facilities. We only have a few things in there currently, like phones and things along that line. Benefits and fixed charges, 0.212%. That's kind of retiree sick time buyouts and things along that line. That's pretty small. Community services, that's our maths, our health survey that we take part in, as well as some other collaboration we have with the health department. Programs with other school districts, that is our out-of-district portion, which is 6.11%. If we look at the budget from a payroll perspective, you can see that payroll is 86% of our budget. Only 14% is expenditures. So when you talk about cutting at a school department because you need people to do the work, it's a very difficult topic because you're talking about limiting the number of people who are actually doing the work with our students. If you go back and we talk about the 3.5% increase in the pledge that's there, the target, 3.3% of that targeted number this year would have been taken up just by payroll and contractual obligations. Looking at this from the salary piece, with the function codes, you can see that 89% of our salaries go towards instructional services, direct services to students. District leadership is only about 3%. Operation and plan is 1%, and other school services are 7%. So looking at the budget, you can see FY23, FY24, and you can see the difference there is 1.696877 for general education, 32% is special education. That dip right there is from using more circuit breaker this year than we did last year. Circuit breaker is a reimbursement that we get for out-of-district tuitions. English language learners costs represent 4% of the budget. All right, the total for the base budget that we're talking about right now is 3.83%. That's as close as we could get it to the 3.5. Budget challenges. One of these is our out-of-district costs. That's also compounded by transporting as well. Monday night, we talked about funds for buses as a capital expense. We have had huge difficulties getting the vans to transport. We've had to hire out, and we'll come back to that as a one-time cost a little bit later, but that is a serious cost driver in this budget. You can see transportation, last year we at this point we were talking about 185. We're now at 203, and our out-of-district placements have gone from 68 to 79. The other thing is we've seen a change in our demographics. We had over 400 students, 470 students register this year. That is representing a change in population. And you can see first language, not English, we are now up to 28.3%. English language learners, those actually requiring EL services, 14.6%. You look back to 17, that was only 7.9, okay? Low income, this has been a big increase from FY21, 29%. We're at 39.6. Those are October 1 numbers. That number has increased since then. Students with disabilities, we're now at 25.3%. There it is, 25.3%. That's up from last year, 22.3. High needs, and you only count once, but high needs is either a student is low income, special education, or an English language learner. They only count once. And right now we're at 57.4% of our student population fit into at least one of those categories, okay? And you can see that that has increased from 5.5 to 5.7 this past year. Special ed, you can see here, as of October, we had 885. We're now at 853. Last year, October 1 numbers, 879. ELs, FY23, 439, 508 for the 1st of October. We're at 537 as of the end of February. These numbers are driving the state reimbursement that we get. As our population is becoming more needy, we are getting more money for the state to accommodate this. So if we look at our base budget here, 54 million, the increase for the base budget from the previous year is 2,023,000. Our total Chapter 70 increase this year was 3.6 million. And if you want to look at it just based on that, about 55.37% of that Chapter 70 money could be allotted or considered for that increase right there. That leaves 1.6 million to cover town expenses and things along that line. This increase from last year was 28.81. We're the fourth highest town in the Commonwealth as far as state reimbursement from Chapter 70. Okay, new staff requests. In this budget, we are asking for 10 positions. Originally, the first set of requests that came to me were 32 positions. Out of those 31, all had a perfectly good rationale for needing them. I'll get to the 22 I did not put into this budget. But here we have 3 full-time equivalents for special ed teachers to provide the special services, special instruction that are needed. 0.2 adjustment counselor at the Callahan. EL teachers at the Balch, and 1 to split between the Callahan and the Cleveland. An EL coordinator. This person we hired a couple years ago with the ESSER grant, and we planned we need to have someone to manage this with this many students, and have strategized to gradually move that into the general budget. This is the last of those moves. Other needs, a preschool administrator. The preschool has gained 3 classrooms since we have left, increased needs of our 3-year-olds coming into the system, and the kindergarten has grown as well. So splitting that position. Elementary support specialist, this is to give emotional and behavioral support at our elementary level to deal with some social, emotional, and behavioral issues that we are seeing there. Interventionists, and again, this was strategized. These were positions put in when we got the ESSER grant 2 years ago, and we are gradually taking them out of the grant and putting them into the general budget. What they are doing is they are actually running groups and doing intervention in general education to keep kids moving forward. This is the kind of strategy you need to have so you don't have more kids falling behind and qualifying for special education. Interesting thing that we've seen from our school improvement plans. Last year's, there was a dip after COVID with student achievement. Our dips are about 5 points from before COVID to the immediate test after COVID. That's pretty small. Most communities were talking about 10, 20, 25 point dips. So these interventionists are making a huge difference for our kids. Nurse at the LMPA, previously that was grant funded. We need to move that out of the health grant that we have. Otherwise, we lose the whole health grant, which is $666,000 over the next few years. This position and having a full-time nurse leader is the reason why we're able to fully maximize our Medicaid reimbursement, which I'll come back to in a little bit. Both this preschool and LMPA really could be considered special ed, because the Little Mustang Preschool Academy is a special ed program that we have role model students in. Okay, what didn't get into the budget? So special ed teachers in the middle school, high school, and the Callahan, we're going to try to hopefully keep our numbers down and not need those. Special ed occupational therapists and a speech language pathologist. Again, hopefully our case numbers will remain where they are and we won't need to address that. A BCBA, there's a board certified behavior analyst. Another half of those, we're seeing mostly they work with children with autism, which we've seen an increase in, but our numbers are stable right now. Paraprofessionals, 6.3. Assistant transportation director, we were going to add that position at a 0.4. And an adjustment counselor at the middle school and the Balch. The middle school, that was part of the plan to staff the new middle school. We'll have to wait on that. English language learners and ed assistant, there's an awful lot of paperwork for the state and federal government that is falling currently on our director of EL services. Gen ed, other needs. Elementary HPE is health, phys ed. So this is a plan to increase the health and PE offerings for our first and second graders in our elementary. Well worth it in a program that's needed, but we cannot fit it into this budget. Teachers at the Balch and the Oldham to address class size, they're right at about 24, 25, getting into the uncomfortable measure. We are keeping an eye on those numbers. The middle school is another computer science teacher. That will be needed when we bring the 5th grade up if we're going to offer that program, but we're going to have to wait on that. And the high school position is an AP teacher, a science AP teacher, to expand our AP offerings. We're not going to be able to do that next year. Middle school administrative assistants, and again, that is getting ready for the 5th grade to come up in a couple years. We're going to wait on that. So those were the 22 no's that did not make me very popular. Okay, so funding the budget. So one of the main funding sources is our revolving accounts. We collect fees. They go into revolving accounts, and we use them to offset the budget. They have to go for what they're collected for. I can't use transportation money to pay for athletics. They have to stick in their lanes, if you will. You can see that looking at FY23 for transportation, $300,000, $200,000, that goes right towards our bus contract, okay? Preschool tuition, gonna move up a little bit to $219. We did have to open another classroom, so we're able to collect a little more from our role models and pay for some staff there. Athletics, up to $100,000, and that goes towards everything from coaching to transportation to officials. Drama music, $34,000 is the offset. Circuit breaker, we're making kind of a significant jump there to $4.3 million. And the stabilization, that is an account in the past when we have extra, we've been putting it into a rainy day fund. Next year we're budgeting to draw down that another $550,000. That will pretty much empty that account. Okay? So you can see the total increase, the total offsets last year increase was $730,000. This year the increase will go to $1.3 million. Okay, so circuit breaker, and again, this is over. So this is reimbursement we get for 4 times foundation. There's a big formula. I'm not going to try to get everybody up to speed on the calculus. But what you're kind of looking for is you get circuit breaker, all right? You use about half of it in the offset, and you have kind of a year's worth in reserve. So we can hold the money for 2 years, but if you're really in a good budget situation, this green part here is kind of, if there is something that comes along in special education that is unforeseen. Someone moves in, they need a residential hospital-type school, okay? You can see last year we had to, that's a little out of balance. Next year it will be out of balance, and our green is getting kind of low. But that's the way we could get this budget to fit where we are right now. Medicaid reimbursement, so if you look back, you can see maybe over 100,000. Actually, the year before, I think that was even less. FY22, they kind of changed some of the categories that we could collect on with COVID, so that number went way up. That 578,000 is part of the free cash that we're kind of asking for in the warrant articles coming later. This year, up to third quarter is 237, but we do expect about 320 from Medicaid reimbursement. And again, that goes into free cash. That will show up next year. But that's a lot of work from our counseling staff, our nursing staff, to put in the paperwork to get that money from the federal government. Okay, and that goes to the town. Okay, grants. So FY21 and FY22, you can see the red bars there. Those are the COVID, the ESSER grants and what have you. Those are kind of one-time things, but we have been very active in getting grant money to provide programming to our students and improve what we're doing. If you look back in FY19, you can see the bar there, and if you look where we are in FY23 at $2.9 million worth of grants that we brought in this year. So we're going to keep doing that. It's a good way to fund things. Anyone who is hired through a grant, the benefits are also covered through the grant. Chapter 70, if you look at the historical comparison here, you can see the red represents the increases. FY22, kind of nobody got an increase across the state. But you can see in FY23, our number last year was $3.4 million from the state, and this year is $3.6 million. I do expect that to be a robust number based on what is continuing to happen with our student population going forward into next year. The other factor in here is that there was a realigning, it's called the Student Opportunities Act, which is actually trying to increase the funding to districts across the state, especially based on demographics, and this is why we're seeing this much of an increase here. Okay, so the warrant request articles, and I'm going to do one presentation, not get up here for Article 6 and Article 7 and talk about them. I'm going to do them all at once, so we don't have to listen to me more than once. But what we've done is we're trying to remove one-time costs out of the base budget. So that $57 million, $58 million includes these costs in the budget, but we're looking at them as one-time costs. One of the big ones is special ed transportation. Okay? So right here, there's $500,000 that we're looking for. So what is happening now is we can't get the vans. We can't buy the vans to put them on the road. So we're having to outsource. We're having to hire outside companies to transport our kids. Up until 3 years ago, we were transporting everybody internally, both homeless and special ed. We can't get the vehicles to do the work right now. We've tried multiple times over the last 2 years. Every time we put in an order, it gets canceled. And these are supply line issues with the transportation companies. It doesn't particularly help that Amazon keeps buying all the vans out from underneath us, but we'll talk about that another day. So that $500,000 is towards that. The other piece, and Mr. Slater spoke to this a little bit, that $275,000, that's part of the ESSER grant, because it's a supply line issue, okay, and because it's a one-time cost, we were able to get permission to pay some of this cost out of the ESSER grant, so it's not all coming from the town at this point, okay? School-based medical Medicaid program, we're asking for $350,000 from free cash to cover that, and if you go back to here, you can see that last year, $578,000 were put into free cash from our work with Medicaid. So we're asking for $350 of that. $350 is about the average of what it should be going forward, $325, $350. So we're asking for that this year. And again, that's to cover these one-time costs. Homeless transportation, we get reimbursement from the federal government. $22,000 is about the average of that. That money does go to the town, so we're asking for that to kind of fill the gap. This was voted on actually Monday night. And then we are asking for override stabilization. We put that fund together, hoping to avoid an override for the first 5 years, and we, as a town and the school, have done it. First time we've had to ask for either of us ask for any of that money, but we're here with that today. So that total is $2,419,643. Okay, so if we look at this by category and funding source, so if we're looking general education, and this is using all of the money, and my number differs from Mr. Slater's numbers because when we did the budget reduction, we didn't include that in this number, okay? But 62% of it is going towards general education, 35% of our budget is going towards special education, and this is everything. It's the one-time costs and the base budget, and 4% towards the English language learners, okay? If we're looking by category, you can see that those numbers are still pretty similar. Okay, so in summary, I should have brought my water up with me. So, you know, we're continuing to work to meet the needs of an increasing diverse population. Additional attention to educational learning loss. That has been a consistent effort since we got the ESSER funds. You might have seen announcements asking for summer programs, vacation programs, after school programs. That's where that money is going. Increased staffing assistance and instructional support with students with disabilities, our English language learners, as well as general ed. Everybody is being supported here. Continuation of the one-to-one Chromebook. We put that in about 5 years ago, and that has been part of our budget, that refresh. It still is in this budget. The laptops for the teachers, every 5 years they get old. The operating systems will no longer work. That is still in this budget. Next year's curriculum refresh, we're still holding to those promises that we made in the override of what we were going to do with that money. And that's next year we're looking at pre-K to 12 art, K to 5 multilingual or English language learning programs, and K to 5 health and wellness. I can tell you right now the health and wellness teachers are already really excited about this because it's the first time they've had a refresh in a long time. Professional development, diversity, equity, inclusion. We're also looking at trauma-based informed instruction as well for next year. Technology and instructional practice will continue. And our community service, community collaboration agreements, Minds Matter and the Interface Referral Hotline, as well as the Metro West Youth Behavior Survey. And of course, we're going to continue to search for and effectively use grants for our students in our classrooms. So with that, that is the budget presentation. So we will turn it back over to you, Madam Moderator, and see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Hopefully somebody will get you your water. Questions? Ms. Quinn?
Sarah Quinn, District 2. I have a couple of questions. First, could you explain to me what the costs are that are in the labor relations line items? One was, it looked like for settlements, and one said school committee. Sorry, I don't like this new system because I can't keep my book open and talk at the same time.
Dr. Thompson, are you going to take that, or is Ms. Sheridan going to take that?
My secretary's finding the page.
Yeah. Do you have a page number?
Yeah, her assistant is finding the page. They've got it.
Yeah, she would not. Yeah, we got to do the budget book. 1138.
Total is 159,503.
Is that settlements or is that just legal costs?
Right before that is 1137, and that's Legal Service School Committee Labor Relations for $75,000.
There are no legal settlements, so I don't know what that.
I'm looking for it, hold on. In my budget, it's a little different in here than mine.
The other number is 1430. Is that the one that you refer to, rather than the line number?
This is incorrect. There is no legal settlement.
Yeah, there are no legal settlements that should be in this
Well,
budget.
there's a significant amount of money allocated for them. Yeah, district-wide labor relations, 159,503 in the FY 2024 request.
It's not in my budget, so I'm not sure why it's in this budget.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that with the accounting department, but we currently do not have any legal settlements. I don't know why that number would be there. We do have a line item for legal fees for contacting district, attorneys. There's a school committee attorney, and there's also one that we use for special education.
Okay. My next question was, the online learning request, allocation request. There's a $21,000.
Yeah, that's
that
for the high school. That's credit recovery.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly, it's probably somewhere in your presentation or this book that I can't navigate and think at the same time. What is the total that we pay for out-of-district tuition? I think it's in several different line items, and I can't do math, so.
Now I'm
Speech and language. That's what I can tell.
Are you talking about the, I can tell you for, let's see. Oops, sorry. We have a total in the tuition of Mass Public Schools in the amount of $73,144. We have non-public day schools in the amount of $5,454,296. In the residential of $2,532,476. And then in the collaboratives of $1,716,710. And then from that, we have offset it with our circuit breaker reserve fund that we get from the state, and then some of the special education reserve fund that we took from if we have any money at the end of the year, been trying to move it to that special education reserve fund so that if there's unanticipated special education needs, we have a place to go to.
And I appreciate that. I'm not at all critical of those costs, but I do recognize that it's an increasing amount every year. And this year, an unprecedented increase. What are we doing in terms of reclaiming that cost a little bit? Are we looking at the cohorts of students that are being sent out of district and brainstorming ways to bring them back? Because tuition is crazy enough expensive, but transportation adds an additional expense, and it is, like I said, I don't do a lot of math, but I think it's far cheaper to hire a teacher and an aide and create a program than it is to keep transporting one or two kids towns away.
Yeah, it depends on the severity of need and whether we can, house them and serve them in district. That is, we do look at that every year. There are some upcoming needs and programming that we have groups of kids that will age up, and we have to do some programming in district to make sure that they don't go out of district. Once you're not meeting a student's need or they're not making progress and they end up, it is a team decision to bring them back. It's not like we can say, you're coming back. The other thing that does influence these numbers is the state allowed for a 14% increase in out-of-district tuition. We're lucky in that our collaborative tech did not do that. I think they did 4%. But that saved us. That's one of the reductions before the budget came forward.
But we do use several collaboratives, not just
Yes,
tech.
we do. But tech is our biggest one.
But
Yeah.
full disclosure, I ask this as a parent of an out-of-district student who would happily have returned him should anyone ever staff a program appropriately. And so I'm not aware that those conversations are happening regularly with the team, including parents. But also as a taxpayer, it hurts my heart that it's costing so much for him to go somewhere else and not have his needs met. So I would love it if the Student Services Department could put together some sort of presentation for taxpayers so we know what we're paying for and really what the complexity of these students' profiles are that we're not able to meet their needs here.
Yep.
Mr. Groh.
Nicholas Groh, District 7. If we're not paying for these legal settlements that is allocating $159,503 to our budget, why don't we reallocate that money back to our stabilization fund?
This is an error.
Ms. Sheridan, we can't hear you.
Sorry. From looking at this and looking at my budget that's here, there seems to be something's wrong in this, because that account is not even on my list. So I can't.
That's from the town,
speak to it. Do you know what I mean? What? It's this.
Can we recess for about 5
Yeah.
minutes?
What we're going to do is we're going to take a 5-minute, I'm going to call a 5-minute recess so these guys can confer to get an answer. Please do not leave, but stretch your legs a little bit.
Closer to you, get closer to me. Darling, if you want me to be closer to you, get closer to me. Darling, if you want me to love only you, then love only me. Darling, if you want me to see only.
Score, that's what you're really doing? I believe they were ahead at the end of the first quarter, but. Can everybody please be seated? Talking to you, Mr. McFarland. All right, Dr. Thompson, I think you have an answer?
Whoop, yeah, oh, that was fast. All right, yeah, so that is actually a collective bargaining reserve. It's mislabeled. Okay, so while we're negotiating contracts, instead of putting them places, there's an account that we put, and then we transfer them into salary lines. So that's what that money is. So it's mislabeled in the budget book.
So the intent of that 150, whatever it was.
It is 1137 Labor Relations under Legal Service
No,
School
it was
Committee.
1138 for $159,503.
Right. Yeah, that's the next one.
Yep. So that is intended for, pardon my ignorance here, so you're spending $159,000 for negotiation
Spending
itself?
100, so that's the money that we will use for salary increases come this spring.
So that's annual increases and
Right.
things like that?
Right,
Okay.
for multiple, not one person, for multiple people.
I presume as much. Thank you.
Yeah, for some reason it's kind of in the wrong line. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, and Dr. Thompson, I'm assuming that going forward, we'll make sure that we review the budget book too, so everything's aligning up appropriately. Thank you. One thing I should mention also that we didn't mention, I should have mentioned in front of the discussion, is for the school budget, we vote the bottom line. How the school department chooses to spend it is their decision. not the decision of town meeting. We're only voting a bottom line number for them. Excuse me. Hold on. Okay. Yes, sir, in the back.
Hello, Pat Ronan, District 7, through you, Madam Moderator. Do you have a breakdown of where the override stabilization funds are going? The 1.4 million, they're one-time costs, correct? The other warrant articles tied them to some sort of service, so I didn't know if you had like an accounting of where that $1.4 million is going.
Ms. Sheridan, are you going to take that?
I'm not sure it's done. So the override stabilization fund is going to be used for some of the out-of-district tuition and the extraordinary special education costs. So it's mostly going to be in the out-of-district and the out-of-district tuition and the transportation areas. Because those are the two areas in the budget that we've had the most difficulty in. So.
Through you, Madam Moderator, my only follow-up is, so how much do we have left in the override stabilization if we were to approve this?
Mr. Slater, you want to take that?
I do, Madam Moderator, thank you. Alan Slater, District 4. Give me just a minute to find the slide. It's somewhere in the range of $800,000. I'll try to give you the exact number. $852,477.
Further on the motion? Yes, sir, Gio.
Tom Gio, District 6. Two questions. The first one is, what is the overall increase in student population? I saw a lot of numbers going up and a lot of need for teachers and positions, but what is the overall population increase in the school department?
There isn't actually a population increase. I think we're up 60 students. It's a change in the population. We have a more needy population than we did 3 years ago.
Okay, and this may sound a little bit facetious, but if we spent $22,000 on homeless student transportation, how do they know where to pick them up and drop them off?
Yeah, well, it's actually considerably more. I think it's 10 times more than that, and it's actually, this is a federal law. They give us a pittance towards it. But they register with us, and you know, we're driving to the South Shore to pick them up. We're driving to New Bedford to pick them up. So yes, and we have to do it. It's the law. So
Excuse me, that brings up another question. I thought we educate Norwood students. Why are we educating students from outside of Norwood?
they were from Norwood.
They were.
Yep.
Don't they have to continue to live in Norwood?
They don't.
Really?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Good evening. Brian Gunning, District 1. Superintendent, in 2022, the U.S. News said that as far as college readiness, the index out of 100, Norwood scored a 31.4 out of 100 for college readiness. So if we give the school all this money, what are you going to tell the parents that the school is doing to ready their students for college with this really abysmal ranking?
Yeah, well, I would not hold my hat to the U.S. News and World Report. That's not particularly a good one. However, we have expanded advanced placement. We have more students in advanced placement. And we have a very high graduation rate and a very high rate of students that are going on to four-year colleges. So we will continue with that.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Ms. Taylor.
Jean Taylor, District 8. It's just a general question. Under Willett School, under 1337, psychological services. In 2023, it was $10,437. Would you please explain what you've had added? It's not really added, it looks like it was put back, because it's $41,247 this year, and in 2022, it was $43,960. What changed in 2020? What adjustments did you have to make?
Yeah, we added a full-time counselors to the Willett. We did not have full-time counselors until last year.
Wow. Okay, in 2022, you had 43,960, so you had some that year. You lost them?
FY23 here, it was an amended budget, so we had difficulty finding a psychologist in FY23, so there was some contracted services until we could get the psychologist. So there was a budget transfer to the contracted service line. But then when we went to the 24 budget, we prefer to have the psychologist in-house. So it's back to be the in-house psychologist and taken away from the contracted services line. It was an amendment because of that situation.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Very needed in this day and age.
Thank you. Ms. Howard.
Thank you. Judith Howard, District 3. I think you're going to kill me. Is there a sign out there somewhere to invite Tom, Dick, and Harriet to come to Norwood to have these things? I'd like to see the money spent on transportation or drivers for transportation. I'd like to see the classes here in Norwood and have a professional come here and teach these children. Children who live here who have these needs. But to be the fourth town in the Commonwealth, to be in this position, I think it's very unfair for taxpayers here. And we do have the need, I understand that, but I don't know, the increases are just too much for this small town, really. And I understand the whole thing, but I'd like to see the professionals teach here in Norwood.
All right,
Thank you.
I think that's just a statement rather than a question, Ms. Howard, right? I saw a hand out in the back, or you're good? Okay. Ms. Newey?
Kelly Newey, District 5, move the question.
Did you get that, Madam Clerk? All right, the question has been moved. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. All right, that takes us back to the main motion, motion 7, funding a total of $54,824,884 for education. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. Motion carries. That brings us to motion number 8 on Article 4. Mr. Slater, Public Works.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Article 4, Motion 8, motion by the Finance Commission, that the sum of $19,640,792 be raised by rates and appropriated for the purposes indicated. All sums voted for salaries are to be expended, are to be expended in conformance with the official budget of the Finance Commission unless otherwise voted by town meeting. All sums voted for new equipment shall be expended for items listed in the budgets approved by the Finance Commission and voted by the town meeting. As displayed in the budget book, restrictions by salary totals, operating expenses totals, and capital expenses totals are explicitly incorporated into this vote. Public Works total, $19,640,792.
And once again, Ms. Bodenhofer is seconding. Ms. Dixon, I have you registered on this one. I'm assuming, Mr. Slater, you have anything on this? I'm sorry. Okay. Ms. Dixon? This is Public Works. You want to take a pass? All right. It's Public Works. Mr. Hearn, I think you had a question on this one?
David Hearn, District 4. My question relates to a matter that I raised last fall, and I'm looking at the yellow sheet from November of last year, where we were told, and by the way, I agree with Ms. Quinn, it's very difficult to hold these budget books. I like the old way. Plus, I had a lifetime supply of blue binders as a result. We were told last fall that last year was the last time that we were going to be taking meter charges and applying them to rates. And that going forward, and I'm reading now directly from, going forward, we will be seeking town meeting approval in the spring to utilize the appropriate mechanism to allow the meter fund receipts to be properly segregated to pay for their intended use. Now, I don't see in the budget anything for meter replacements. And to give a little history for folks who weren't around here 20 years ago, we voted in May of 2002, I believe it was, to adopt an automated meter reading system with a meter charge. And that was after a study had been done that showed that old meters, meaning meters that are more than 10 years old, do not read properly. And it's the mechanical meters. They may be better now, and that's fine. It's not, we had a two-part system. The mechanical meters that the water runs through and the electronic readers that sent out a signal. Those have to be replaced occasionally. But the idea was every 10 years, every meter was going to be replaced so that everybody paid their fair share because people weren't. And that was a study of, I think, 7 town meeting members and several staff. And we sold it to the town meeting on that basis. Now, I would like to know if anybody here does know what percentage of the residential meters have been replaced every 10 years, as was discussed 21 years ago. Does anybody know? Madam Moderator.
Mr. Ryan, do you have that one?
Madam Moderator, I don't have that exact amount. We're close to 9,000 units throughout the town, and right now we're experiencing difficulty with supply chain, real severe shortages of some of the electronic meter reading devices that Mr. Hearn's talking about. So we're probably around 2,500 that aren't reading correctly, and we've been waiting over a year and a half to try to get those supplies in. We have a meter contractor on board to do that along with our meter readers. So hopefully that answers the question somewhat for you.
Madam Moderator, well, Mr. Ryan's there. He may have the answer to the next question. What about the mechanical meters, the actual meters that the water runs through? How many of those, do we have a sense of what percentage of those have been replaced on an every 10-year basis?
Well,
as was recommended.
Right. Every time we go to replace the MTU, the electronic device, if it's over 10 years old, we would replace the mechanical body as well. But since we're not visiting properties right now to replace the MTU, we're not replacing as many as the mechanical meters. We're waiting on the supply to come in for the electronic ones. The mechanical ones are more available. We're just trying to be more efficient with our contractor. When he goes there, he replaces both at the same time.
Now, Madam Moderator, we had a pandemic that started in 2020. So there were 18 years or so prior to that that we could have been doing without the supply chain issues, replacement of meters. Does the Director of Public Works have an idea of how many meters were replaced before the supply chain issues arose? What percentage?
I'm not going to guess on that, Madam Moderator. We're consistent each year replacing meters in the electronic devices based on our budget that was afforded us each year, so we try to keep up pace with that. We were recognizing these were starting to fail. That's why we brought on a consultant to help us with that. We put out a bid a year and a half ago, started it, and then things just dried up. But you know, as soon as those MTUs come in, we were expecting them in April. Now we're telling September. We're ready to go between our meter consultant and our in-house meter reader and operator.
So I guess the answer is that we don't know what happened between 2002 and 2020. Mr. Ryan mentioned the budget, Madam Moderator. And it was the understanding in 2002 and going forward that that charge we were paying every month was going into a fund. That's how it was presented to town meeting when it approved it in an overwhelming vote of 124 to 24 in May of 2002. So my question is, what are we doing with the money? What have we done with the money that we've collected from people every month since that went into effect 20-odd years ago? Why isn't there a budget that would clearly pay for that? I think part of the answer is that we have been robbing Peter to pay Paul. We have been, and we did this as recently as last fall, taking money out of that fund and using it to reduce the water rates, which is to artificially lower those rates at the expense of meter replacement, which is as important as setting rates. Because without a meter, which is the cash register for the water system, we're not collecting money from the right amount of money from everybody. So the manager has assured me that we're going to have some sort of segregated fund, but I think we were told that last fall, and yet the money has disappeared as far as a line item in the budget. So I wonder if we could get some explanation of where the money goes, what it's being used for, and what it's going to be used for. We're now paying $687 or thereabouts
Are
a month.
you asking a question, Mr. Hearn, that you
I'm
want
getting-
answered?
I'm getting to that question, to the end of that question, but the money I'm referring to is now up to $687. Where is it going? Where has it gone? And what assurances can we rely on? Because we were told something in the fall, and it seems not to be happening. Thank you.
I think the Director of Finance is going to address that. Ms. Lemay?
Meg Lemay, Finance Director. Those funds are going into a special revenue fund currently. The Department of Revenue came out recently and told us that we cannot have a special revenue fund that's tied to an enterprise fund, that it needs to be part of the enterprise fund. So at the end of this fiscal year, those funds will close out to the enterprise fund. However, we do have mechanisms within the financial reporting system to earmark those, to set them aside. So they won't just close out to the retained earnings of the enterprise fund, but that's how it's being handled right now.
Yep.
I appreciate Ms. LeMay's answer, but for a layperson, does that mean that this money, which in the past has not been used for its intended purpose, is going to be used for its intended purpose of replacing meters, not to pay water rates?
Correct, that's the intention, is to earmark those funds for meters.
All right, so going forward, we can expect that whatever the number is, and the manager has told me that it may go down when there's an analysis of rates and costs and so forth, but that if we pay, say, $5 a month on our bill as a meter charge, that will be devoted exclusively to the replacement of meters and not applied to reduce water rates. The manager says correct.
The manager says correct.
Okay, I appreciate the assurance, and I hope we don't have this discussion again, because it is, and others will bear this out who were on the committee, we want this to be equitable, we want it to be fair, and we want everybody to pay their fair share, which hasn't always happened, not because people didn't want to do it, but because the meters wear out. So I look forward to a new meter. My 10 years is coming up. A lot of other people had them 20 years, and when we did the study, by the way, there were some meters that were 80 years old that had never been replaced. Not a good thing, and that's why I pushed for this since it's come up as a topic. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Hearn. Anything else on public works? Mr. Hopkirk.
Francis Hopcroft, District 1. The numbers that are shown on the chart, the numbers in this book, don't seem to be consistent. Some of them are that 71,500 is the same, 14,069 is the same. The bottom line is $1 million difference between what's in this book. Can you tell us what the real numbers are and why they're different?
Mr. Mizuko?
Sure. So the number that's here is the appropriation related to cover just water and sewer direct costs. If you go back to the first couple of motions where there's an indirect water sewer cost or water sewer is covering somewhere else in the budget, the motion is to raise X dollars from water sewer and Y dollars from the tax levy. So the total budget is based on total water and sewer expenses. That's why that 1960 number shows different. If you go back and look at motion 1, for instance, it's, I think, $230,000 from water and sewer rates to cover portions of the water sewer costs that are contained in those budgets.
Does that show up? Does that show up again in this part of the budget? Because the budget number here is $20,600,000.
It does. This is the appropriation. That $20 million number is the whole budget. That's why you see a difference for a slightly lower appropriation number. We've appropriated already X dollars of it.
Why doesn't that show up here more clearly?
If you're talking about the motion, I suppose we could put an edit there, but this is just the motion. It shows up in the budget book.
Right. If you look at the bottom, Mr. Hopcroft, you're going to see motion 8 is for 19, and then motions 1, 3, and 6 add up for the other 839, which is where you're getting the $20,479,976.
Okay, I can follow that number there, but I still think that it's certainly not clear in this section of the book. And if you want to put that little chart at the bottom there, I think it would clarify things quite a lot. It really looks like we're paying for it twice here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hopcroft.
We can do that.
Yeah, and Mr. Mizuko said can do. So thanks for the feedback. Ms. Gio.
Tom Gio, District 6. I hate to bring up a sore subject, but when meters fail, which way do they go? Do they always low? So the department is losing money.
Good. Yeah.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah. Believe me, I am.
Anything else? All right, seeing none, I'm going to take Article 4, Motion 8 for $19,647,092 for Public Works. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Motion carries. All right, folks, that has finished the annual budget. We now move on to Article 5, motion, which is the aforementioned funding. Motion made by the FinCom, Mr. Slater.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Article 5, motion made by the FinCom to see that the sum of $500,000 be transferred from free cash and appropriated to offset the amount needed to be raised for one-time expenses related to special education transportation contract services for fiscal year 2024.
And again, seconded by Ms. Bodenhopper. I believe that this has already been addressed in Dr. Thompson's presentation. So you're good, Dr. Thompson? Thank you. Anything on the motion? Seeing none, let's put it to a vote. This is $500,000 to be transferred from free cash for special education transportation contract services. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. Motion carries. Article 6, and actually Article 6 will be broken down into two separate motions because of funding sources. Mr. Slater with motion number 1.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Motion by the Finance Commission that the sum of $372,000 be transferred from free cash and appropriated to offset the amount needed to be raised for one-time expenses related to extraordinary special education costs and out-of-district costs.
And Ms. Bodenhofer again is seconding this. Again, this was explained in Dr. Thompson's presentation previously, one-time costs. This is a majority vote for this first motion. Anything on the motion? Seeing none, let's put it to a vote. It's a sum of $372,000 transferred from free cash to offset the amount needed to raise one-time expenses related to extraordinary special education costs and out-of-district tuition costs. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion carries. Motion number 2, Mr. Slater.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Motion by the FinCom that the sum of $1,487,643 be transferred from override stabilization and appropriated to offset the amount needed to be raised for one-time expenses related to extraordinary special education costs and out-of-district tuition costs.
And again, Ms. Bodenhofer is seconding. This motion, because it is coming from a stabilization fund, is going to require a 2/3 vote. And again, the explanation on this was mentioned in Dr. Thompson's presentation previously. Any questions? Mr. Greeley.
Joe Greeley, District 6. Between this article and the previous article, we're talking real money. I think town meeting members are at a disadvantage, as cited, I think, by Ms. Quinn, in that we're scrambling, looking for some of the support, and now we're being asked to approve somewhere in the neighborhood of just shy of $2 million between these two articles. I think just as a recommendation directed mostly to the school committee, but as a community effort, you can't really expect town meeting members to vote for $2 million without putting something in front of us that's going to allow us to make an informed decision. I don't think we've been served well tonight in this specific regard, and I do apologize because I don't want your job. Dear school committee, I appreciate everything you do. But we're not really, we don't have all the facts and figures to appropriately vote on this. And it's one of those things where, yes, we believe you. Yes, we believe it's out of control. Yes, we hope something is in the works to reduce the impact going forward. But I don't think we have all the tools and all the background that will let us do our jobs. So this is just a observation and a request for future votes. I'm definitely voting in favor of this, there's no question with that, but I just don't think we're being presented with the right tools that will allow us to do our job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Greeley. Ms. Bodenhofer.
Maya Bodenhofer, District 9 and FinCom member. I just wanted to respond a little bit to that question with respect to the Budget Balancing Committee in my role as one of the members of the Budget Balancing Committee. One of the things that we talked about during the Budget Balancing Committee was trying to use some of these one-time fund sources like stabilization, the override stabilization money, the free cash money, to cover things that we believed to be not necessarily ongoing expenses. We had a large discussion at that meeting about out-of-district tuition and things like that. Certainly out-of-district tuition will be continuing. That it is an ongoing expense. But in this upcoming fiscal year, there's a significant increase that's happening. Is that better? Okay. There's a significant increase that's happening because the state sets the tuition that private out-of-district schools can charge. This year for FY24, the state has approved, I believe, an 11% increase a 14% increase, I'm sorry, a 14% increase in that out-of-district tuition. That is an enormous number for our district to absorb and for every district in the state. Ann Haley, Sarah Quinn, and I attended a FinCom conference a few weeks ago. Oh, so Sarah Sullivan and I. I'm so sorry. I looked right at you. All right, sorry. Sarah was asking about out-of-district tuition, and now I'm like getting, all right. But my point was that at the FinCom conference, lots of finance commissions were talking about the struggle with out-of-district tuitions that are spiking in this coming year. As Dr. Thompson explained, there is a special education circuit breaker, which is a reimbursement program from the state. So we are going to see a significant increase in costs in FY24 because of this large increase in tuition. And then in FY25, we expect to see a corresponding increase in our special education circuit breaker reimbursement. But that leaves us with a hole in FY24. So that one-time hole was the reason that the Budget Balancing Committee used to justify recommending that this funding be used toward the budget this year.
Mr. Slater, did you want to be recognized? Or were you just clarifying that you knew the difference between Ms. Quinn and Ms. Sullivan?
Would have been what I was going to discuss.
Okay. Just checking. All right. See, up. Ms. Neil Rizzo?
Katie Neal Rizzo, District 2. I understand that this is a lot of money, and we have a lot of unfunded mandates still in education. But I also want to applaud and recognize the compassion and professionalism and care with which the district addresses our high-need students and the needs of these students. These are our children and our neighbors and our family members. They are not others. They are not coming in from all over the place. They live in Norwood. They belong here. And they deserve our respect and our support. And I especially want to recognize the professionalism of our trained teachers who love and care for our children like they are their own.
Thank you. Please, no applause. No applause in town meeting. Mr. Connolly, you have your hand raised? All right, all in favor of moving for the question, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? Okay, that takes us back to the motion, and again, folks, this is a 2/3 vote. The sum of $1,487,643 be transferred from override stabilization for expenses related to extraordinary special education costs and out-of-district tuition costs. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Madam Clerk, the motion passes unanimously. Article 7 from the Finance Commission, Mr. Slater.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Indefinite postponement.
And I believe that's second gladly by Ms. Bodenhofer. Yes. Put it to a vote for indefinite postponement, and this is because the money is not needed. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Motion carries. All right, that is going to bring us to Article 8, which is the beginning of 3 articles on the community, around community preservation, and we are going to start off with a presentation by Community Preservation Committee Chair Joe Sheehan that's going to cover all three of these motions. Mr. Sheehan.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. My name is Joe Sheehan, District 2, and also Chairman of the Community Preservation Committee. First of all, I just wanted to thank the committee for all their hard work this year. And if I could just recognize them quickly, who's on the committee, and that would be Catherine Walsh, Patty Griffin Starr, Maria Galician, Joe Greeley, John Hall, Cheryl Doyle, Julie Baba Issa, and Matt Lane. And I also want to thank Kristen Phelps, who is our CPC coordinator. She's done a great job for us, and she does, when it comes to the CPA laws, and she keeps us coloring within the lines. She keeps us in line, informed with those type things, and a lot of other things. And she's responsible for this presentation tonight also. And I also want to thank Town Meeting for your past support, and we ask for your support tonight for these project recommendations. There are 3 articles, 8, 9, and 10. 8 and 9 are basically financial housekeeping items, and 10 will be the main event. That's all the projects that will be coming before us. The estimated revenue for this year, fiscal year 24, is, with the CPA surcharge revenue, is $790,000, $866. The second number is actually based on fiscal year 2023. It's basically 10% of that. That's a very conservative number. We don't have the numbers for fiscal year 24 yet. It hasn't finished yet, so that's an estimate. And that comes in for a total of $867,326. Article 8 is a housekeeping article that takes the total estimated revenue for fiscal year 24 and distributes it to reserve funds in accordance with the CPA statute. Article 8 sets aside CPA funds for future spending, but does not propose any spending. There are 2 sources of CPA revenue. The first one is the local 1% surcharge on our property taxes, and the second one is the state match or annual distribution from the Massachusetts Community Preservation Trust Fund. The CPC consulted with the Finance Department and Community Preservation Coalition to develop the estimated revenue from each source for fiscal year 24. This year's estimates are shown here, and the sum is just over $867,000. A couple of points. Last year's match was 38%. Fiscal year 24 match should exceed 10%, but without DOR guidance, a very conservative match was used. The match is a percentage of the prior year's local surcharge collection and is based on the amount of money collected by the state through the Registry of Deeds. And the revenue allocation, these are the percentages. So under the law, when this money that is allocated, 5% is for administrative purposes. I don't think we've ever used the entire amount, and any extra amount goes back into the undesignated fund. And then there are the 3 different uses are 10% each. So that would be community housing, historical resources, and open space and recreation. The remaining 65% is undesignated, meaning that can be spent on future projects in any of the 3 categories. The next slide just shows the amounts up the top of the administrative operating expenses. That's the one with $43,366. And the 10% for community housing, open space, and preservation of historic resources are each 10%, they're each $86,732. And the undesignated is 65%, and that total is $563,762. The next underneath, if we read it across, it's the reserve fund balance. That's what we have prior to this year. The estimate, if you read that across, and it gives you the three different funds within. That would be community housing, historic resources, open space and recreation, and then the unrestricted funds. And that totals up to $2,672,419. The next line is the estimated revenue that we should be receiving, and the total funds available are at the bottom, and we're pretty healthy there. If you look down in the far right, we've got $3,496,377. That's before we possibly spend any money tonight. Administrative funds of just over $43,000 will be made available for spending through Article 9. This appropriation is expenses incurred in fiscal year 2024. Anything left in this reserve fund at the close of fiscal year 24 will be moved to the undesignated or unrestricted reserve fund. As a point of information, the CPC to date has not used the full appropriation to this account, meaning remaining funds have been rolled into the funds available for future project spending. The second table details the dollar amounts that will be available for project spending following the vote on Article 8. So the combined balances across the project reserve funds is nearly $3.5 million. This next slide shows you all the projects that are in front of us and the amounts of money that if we spend for each, the amount of money we spend for each item. And Article 10 is the main event. It's why we do what we do here. The project recommendations. Each project is taken up under a separate motion. I'll run through the projects quickly now, and if there are any questions, we can take those up when we make the motions and have our questions and discussions at that time. And we will vote on each item as it comes up. So there'll be 9 separate votes. And I just want to point out that the projects being recommended to the annual town meeting have gone through a thorough process with the Community Preservation Committee, and each was presented at a public hearing earlier in the year. The 9-member CPC voted unanimously to support all of the funding recommendations before you tonight. Total recommended project funding for fiscal year 2024 is just over $1.1 million across all funding categories. And as you can see, the actual total in the bottom right-hand corner, that is $1,159,040. Now, the first item up is for the McDonough Housing Preservation, windows and siding replacement. It's $350,000. The project will replace 60-plus-year-old windows and siding to preserve 152 units of affordable housing at this location. CPA funds will be used as the required match that will allow the Norwood Housing Authority to pursue more than $800,000 from the Department of Housing Community Development through the HILAP program, High Leverage Asset Preservation Program, for local housing authorities. The CPC routinely looks to leverage outside funds such as this project will do. It helps stretch CPA dollars. We saw this before when we worked on the Bernie Cooper Park, and Holly Jones got us a nice grant for over $700,000. So it's great to get more bang for your buck, and that's what we look to do. And we actually ask applicants when able, when they apply or in our discussions with them, if there is any grant money to be had. So we do try to stretch the money that we do spend. Motions 2, 3, and 4 are all historical resource projects brought by the General Manager's Office. Motion 2 is the 1890 History and Directory Book Preservation. That's $5,000. Motion 3 is Memorial Hall Furniture Restoration. That's $10,000. And motion 4 is the Annual Town Reports Preservation. That's $11,000. These are all brought by the Town Manager's Office. And in the past, we had done this before. With CPA funding, we have done similar type projects with historical restoration of books and town reports, that kind of thing. Motion 5 is for $530,000 to fund a historical preservation project at the Old Parish Cemetery. This all began, as some may recall, the work to restore the centuries-old cemetery began with a community group, the Old Parish Preservation Volunteers, who have donated extensive time and resources to care for the property and to research and restore the historic headstones. I know that Patty Fanning is a member and one of the leaders there, and as John Grove and many others, and they would spend their Saturday mornings cleaning up the cemetery. And from there, they came to us for money 2 years ago to create a master plan, and they completed that last year with CPA funds, and they provided a blueprint for restoring the 1741 Old Parish Cemetery. The proposed project came out of that plan, the one that's before you tonight, and includes replacing the perimeter fencing around the 2-acre parcel, adding 2 ornamental entrance gates, and enhancing the Veterans Memorial area. And motion 6 is for $10,000 to fund a transfer to the Conservation Land Fund. Transfer is not intended to replace the annual appropriation to the Conservation Fund, and this recommendation does not contemplate a particular project. Supplementing the Conservation Land Fund will let the Conservation Commission act quickly if an opportunity to purchase a real property interest arises. Funds can be used for the title searches, appraisals, due diligence, and other activities related to acquiring the land. Motion 7 is for $41,040 to fund an open space and recreation project proposed by the General Manager's Office in collaboration with the Veterans Services Office to undertake a master plan for the Disabled Veterans Park, which incorporates healing and contemplative spaces for the veteran community. The proposed master plan would be similar in scope to the plan completed at the Old Parish Cemetery, which would then guide future proposals for park improvements. Motions 8 and 9 present historical preservation projects related to the Morris House, which were jointly proposed by the Board of Selectmen and the Morris House Subcommittee. Article 8 provides funding to have the property listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Securing this listing will open opportunities to pursue other state and federal grants for future work on the house. And Article 9 will fund the rehabilitation of the Morse House exterior in order to preserve the integrity of the building envelope. The condition of the building was evaluated in a recent completed feasibility study, and the work proposed was suggested as part of that report. And this next slide shows us the remaining funds that will, if we were to approve of all of these projects, these are the amounts that would be left. And, if you look at community housing, you go to the bottom, the balance would still have $169,387. And we can read that across for each historic resources, open space and recreation, and the unrestricted CPA funds. And basically, the important number is the one in the bottom right-hand corner of the total for $2,337,000. $2,337,337. So if everything was approved tonight, those are the numbers that would stand. And we thank you for your attention and respectfully request your support for Articles 8, 9, and 10. And I think that's it.
All right, that's all, folks. All right, thank you, Mr. Sheehan. Mr. Slater, and let me just preface what we're doing here, folks. Article 8, the reason we have 3 separate articles, Article 8 is going to be to first accept the funds, and then Articles 9 and 10 are to allocate the funds. And procedurally, that's what we have to do with community preservation funds. So, Mr. Slater, Article 8, the motion.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Moved by the Finance Commission that the following money be set aside from the Community Preservation Fund revenues for future spending as recommended by the Community Preservation Committee for the purposes indicated below. CPF Reserve for Open Space and Recreational Use of Land, $86,732. CPF Fund Reserve for Historic Resources, $86,732. CPF Reserve for Community Housing, $86,732. CPF Reserve for Administrative and Operating Expenses, $43,366. CPF budgeted, parentheses, undesignated reserve account, $563,762, for a total of $867,324.
And Mr. Sheehan, you are seconding that. Thank you. All right. On the motion, Mr. Hopcroft.
Francis Hopcroft, District 1. Since this $867,324 is based on an estimated state income, what happens to these numbers if the state gives us more or less?
Mr. Sheehan?
I expect that they would go up. We would have them in reserve.
Well, if we have to take a vote in order to allocate these, shouldn't we be appropriating a percentage of the total income rather than specific dollars?
Procedurally, I think we have to allocate specific dollars. So what Mr. Sheehan is saying is it's a conservative estimate. So if anything, there could be more money than the 867. But you actually have to allocate the dollar amount. You can't do a percentage.
All right, but we still then have presumably some additional money coming in beyond this.
That's what we expect. I think last time it was, we had a number of 38%. I think because of real estate transactions have gone down, they expect it to be, they want to be more conservative. They expect it to be over the 10%.
I understand the conservative number, and I understand where that 867 came from. But if we have to allocate that dollar by dollar, then don't we have to allocate any increases dollar by dollar? And if not, why not?
Mr. Greeley, I believe, has the answer, who is the treasurer of
Yes, he is.
the Community Preservation Committee, if I am correct.
Thank you. Joe Greeley, District 6, among a few other hats that I wear. So the question, it's obviously a good question. The first number, not to reiterate all of what Joe said in the last couple of minutes, but there's 2 sources of funds. The first source is local revenue. The local revenue is our local revenue is the majority of the funds. And the number that we're basing this motion on came from a combination of the Director of Finance and the Finance Office and the Treasurer's Office. So it's a number that's based on our best estimate, and when I say our, I mean Town Hall's best estimate of based on tax revenue for next year. The second piece, and that's as firm a number as possible, but even that number has things like tax abatements and unexpected revenue increases and such. But we do anticipate, just historically based, we do anticipate that if anything, we'll be on the plus side of that number. The number that's a little more vague, and I hate to use that word, but the number is a little more vague, is the state match. That we're using 10% because that's a conservative number that the state has agreed that that's probably the best we can make, that best estimate. What happens at the end of the year, just like at the end of FY22, FY23, and again, it'll happen at the end of 24, if we receive any additional money, and that could be based on bank account interest or pretty much anything, it could go both ways. Tax abatements are a reduction in revenue. Interest on bank account balances and additional money from the state are on the plus side. But any of those net surpluses will be swept into that bottom line automatically. We don't know what that number is. As a result, we don't vote on it tonight. But any differences will be swept into that budgetary reserve fund and will be available, but not until FY25. So, and I'd obviously defer to the Director of Finance or anyone else for a more specific answer. Thank you.
So I understand the sources, and I understand that the regulations require that it be distributed in accordance with those 10% numbers. How can we then just sweep out any excess without redistributing it by 10%, 10%, 5%, and 65%?
Mr. Greeley, do you want to take that, or Ms. LeMay gets to take it? We'll have the Director of Finance take it.
These are just estimates of what the revenues are, and then the exact go to the tax rate recap. But if there's extra money that comes in, it closes out to the undesignated CPA fund balance. And so at any given point, the undesignated fund balance can be used for projects. So the CPAC has the budgeted reserve, but they also have their undesignated fund balance. So either can be used for projects. So anything above and beyond what's projected closes out to undesignated.
And I think the short answer to that, Mr. Hopcroft, I think what you're getting at, that could be used for anything. It would have to be actually allocated to a project, which would take a separate vote.
That part I understand as well. I'm still not clear that we can take what the state says has to be allocated on a percentage basis and put it into one account.
Basically doing the best estimate that we can do, and anything extra beyond that estimate is going to go into the undesignated reserve account, which could be used for anything, although the project would have to be approved by town meeting.
And the state regulations allow that to be swept into that account without the allocation to the different 10% accounts.
Correct.
It's actually mandatory. It has to be designated to fund balances. It's mandatory that it has to go to the 3 fund balances, and it has to be a conservative number. So if it's under, that's fine. It can't be over. So if our revenue projections were too high and we couldn't meet this, then we wouldn't get our tax rate certified. So they have to be conservative.
Okay, I think if the regulation allows that directly, that's the answer that we're looking for. And that's what I'm hearing you say. So thank you.
All right, seeing nothing else, on Article 8, to allocate funds as designated up on the board here for a total of $867,324 for community preservation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Motion carries. Article 9, Mr. Slater, and this is the first allocation of funds.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Motion by the Finance Commission. Move that the following sum be transferred from the Community Preservation Fund, Administrative Reserve Account, and appropriated for the following purpose. Community Preservation Fund, Administrative Reserve Account, $42,366.
And Mr. Sheehan, you are seconding on the motion, and again, this is a majority vote. Seeing none, let's take it to a vote. This is to appropriate $43,366 to Community Preservation Fund Administrative Reserve Account. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. That takes us to Article 10, which will be 9 separate motions, as Mr. Sheehan mentioned, to allocate funds to specific projects, all requiring a majority vote. With the first motion, Mr. Slater.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Motion by the Finance Commission. Motion number 1. Based upon the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee, that $350,000 be appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund balance reserved for community housing to fund the replacement of windows and siding at the McDonough Housing Complex as proposed by Norwood Housing Authority.
And this is being seconded by Mr. Sheehan again. On the motion, yes, sir.
Pat Ronan, District 7. This seems like a great project. I'm happy to see the community housing funds being used. It seemed like it was amassing quite a fund there. I know that other communities will use this fund to create new affordable housing, create an affordable housing trust, maybe create like a rental assistance program. So I'm all for this project. I think it's awesome, especially that it's being leveraged for more funding. But I know other housing authorities have created a rental assistance program, and we just heard that 40% of our kids in the schools are low income. So if there's an opportunity, whoever might propose it, I think we have, it seems like $170,000 left in this account, and there will be more coming each year. Maybe consider that sort of use. Thank you.
Mr. Lane, are you raising your hand, or are you? No.
But I like what you said.
All right. Also, and forgive me for this, I should have mentioned for all of these projects, the body can only approve the project as is, reduce the funding amount, or reject the project entirely. And that's per the statute around community preservation funds. Anything else on motion 1? Seeing none, let's put it to a vote. All those in favor of allocating $350,000 from the Community Preservation Fund reserved for community housing for replacement windows and siding at the McDonough Housing Complex, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. Motion carries. Motion number 2, Mr. Slater.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Motion number 2, motion by the Finance Commission, moved based upon the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee that $5,000 be appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund balance reserved for historical resources to fund the restoration and preservation of the 1890 History and Directory Book as proposed by the Office of the Town Manager.
And Mr. Sheehan, you're seconding that one again, I believe. All right, Ms. Dixon, I have you registered on this from District 1.
Promise, this is the last one. Honest.
Doris Dixon, District 1. And the reason I'm speaking on this is I'm the one who did donate the book, and I wanted to tell the story of where it came from. My friend Deb Hayward, who used to own one of the stores in Winsmith Mill, posted the book for sale on Norwood Now. I happened to be talking to the admin in Norwood Now, who saw the book and said he was going to remove it. And I said, no, don't you see what it is? So I immediately contacted Deb to buy it over the weekend, and when I picked it up, the first thing I noticed was something that was, many historians in town will recognize, the book was owned by Win Everett. So not only did I find an 1890s book, but it was owned by one of our own historians. So I had already decided to give it back to the town, and that's when I went and turned it over to Tony, and we talked about it, and I want to say thank you to the CPA and to Tony for doing this, as well as, is it getting digitized, Tony? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. Mr. McFarland, it's just a passing across the aisle that's becoming a thing with you two.
Not intentional. Peter McFarland, District 4. I have a question, and it's kind of a general thing as far as tracking projects that have been approved and closing them out. There's a couple projects that have been approved that I know of that haven't been closed out yet, and one of them was the handicap ramp that came from to connect the Bulch School playground down to Elliott Field. That was part of a project that was approved, one of the original projects probably 4 years ago. And then another project is the handicap parking for the Lower Pond Pavilion. These projects have been lingering, and I don't know if they've been closed out, but physically the work that was supposed to be done on these projects hasn't been done, and I'm not sure what the status of this is. And when we, you know, it's kind of off this article, but this motion, but the thing about it is it's basically making sure that money that town meeting has appropriated to be spent is not just sitting in idle and not being expensed to where the project was designated to be done. So.
Mr. Sheehan, you want to address that?
Yes, I do know the Lower Pavilion, they're doing some road work nearby, and I think they're going to be doing some work on Endicott, and I think we were told that they want to do it all at the same time. They just had to move some boulders to make room for the parking, and I think we're waiting for what the state was doing on the main road there, and what they're going to be doing on Endicott. So I assume it's going to be sometime soon. But the other one I don't recall exactly. I know that it was held up. I don't know if anyone's got more detail.
All right, I think our administrator is going to tear it. And please introduce yourself too.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Kristen Phelps, I'm the CPA coordinator. We do have several projects that are still open, but they are in fact progressing. The Alvisos Pavilion work is waiting on, I believe we actually got the Transportation Department approval from the state now, so now it's working with the contractor to get that work done. We do routinely ask for updates on these things, and we're keeping them open precisely so they can be completed as they were proposed. I met with John Kinney, the new rec supervisor, in the last couple of months about the handicap access at the Balch School. That is also, it came in quite a bit higher than was budgeted for, given the supply chain issues. So I believe, I don't know if John, if you have anything else to add to that, but that is something else that's going on. So there are several. The CPC did adopt a closeout procedure. So we routinely discuss project status at our meetings, and there is a whole process for closing projects out, especially when there's budget funds remaining, so that we make sure that they're put back into the appropriate accounts.
Thank you. All right. On the motion to fund $5,000 for the restoration and preservation of the 1890 History and Directory book, all those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. Motion carries. Motion number 3, again, Mr. Slater.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Moved by the Finance Commission. Motion 3, based upon the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee that $10,000 be appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund Balance Reserve for Historical Resources to fund the restoration and preservation of Memorial Hall table and chairs circa 1927, as proposed by the Office of the Town Manager.
And Mr. Sheehan, you're seconding again. On the motion? Ms. Homewood.
Debbie Homewood, District 3. Like the motions, I'm kind of just wondering, is the plaque that we're going to put on every CPA project still in the budget of it? Is that something they're going to come to us later with? Always in the budget?
Do we have an answer for that?
Are there any up?
Mr. Sheehan, do you know?
At the Alavisos, there is one, and it is it comes into the budget. We use that from the money that's been allocated.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else on the motion? Seeing none, $10,000 to fund restoration and preservation of Mem Hall table and chairs from the Historical Resources Fund. And I'll say circa 1927, because my mother was born that year. So I know that's 96 years old. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Motion 4, Mr. Slater.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. A motion by the Finance Commission, motion number 4, based upon the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee that $11,000 be appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund balance reserved for historical resources to fund the restoration and preservation of the annual town reports as proposed by the Office of the Town Manager.
And Mr. Sheehan again is seconding. Ms. Dixon, I do have you registered for this one, but you said you were done. Okay. Anybody else? Seeing none, let's put it to a vote. This is $11,000 be appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund balance reserved for historical resources to fund restoration and preservation of the annual town reports. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Motion passes. Motion number 5, Mr. Slater.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Motion by the Finance Commission, motion number 5, based upon the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee that $430,000 be appropriated from the Community Preservation Undesignated Fund Reserve and that $100,000 be appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund balance reserved for historical resources to fund the rehabilitation of the Old Parish Cemetery, including the replacement of perimeter fencing and cemetery entries and other site work as proposed by the Old Parish Preservation Volunteers and the Department of Public Works.
And Mr. Sheehan, you're seconding again. Anyone on the motion? Mr. Connolly? Nope? No. Mr. Bodenhofer?
Eric Bodenhofer, District 9. Madam Moderator, through you to whomever could do so. Given that this is a $500,000 project, I was wondering if we might see a little bit more detail about exactly what this means, whether replacing the perimeter fencing means chain link again, whether the entries are padlocked swinging gates or actual masonry. And don't get me wrong, I think this would be great. I just feel like for $500,000, there should be a little more detail.
I think Mr. Ryan is going to answer your question.
Madam Moderator, it's the removal of approximately 1,200 feet of chain link fence and replacement with ornamental fence. The two entryways will be two 12-foot swing gates, ornamental swing gates with granite piers on either side, and there will also be a pedestrian access, so you don't have to have those gates open to enter. So right now, to enter the old parish, it's locked facility. The way this design will be these 12-foot gates to allow larger equipment to get in there, but there'll be a pedestrian gate always open so people can go in there and enjoy. At the entrances also there'll be, as I mentioned, granite piers, granite paving at the entrance, a little bituminous concrete work done and some cobblestone work, and then finally a flagpole at the entrance to bring your attention to it as you're entering in from Railroad Ave.
Follow up, Mr. Bodenhofer?
No, that sounds fantastic, so definitely in favor.
Were you looking to have a star for your performance from our town also included, or? Okay. All right, let's put it to a vote. And again, this is to allocate $430,000 from the Community Preservation Undesignated Fund Reserve and $100,000 from the Community Preservation Fund Balance Reserve for historical resources to fund the rehabilitation of the Old Parish Cemetery. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. Motion carries. Motion number 6, Mr. Slater.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Motion by the Finance Commission, motion number 6, based upon the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee, that $10,000 be appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund balance reserved for open space and recreational use of land and transferred to the Conservation Land Fund for purposes consistent with both MGL Chapter 44B and Chapter 40, Section 8C.
And Mr. Sheehan, again, I believe you're seconding this. Just to note for town meeting members, the reason there is a Mass General Law chapter and section mentioned is because this is to appropriate funding for the possible purchase of land, not actual purchase of land. But again, I believe it is the Conservation Commission is the one entity in town that does have a fund to do so. Majority vote. Anything on the motion? Mr. Brody.
Steve Brody, District 4. Is there already, I'm in favor of this. Now, is there already money in this fund to be able to, for the Conservation Commission, to be able to secure land when it's available?
Yes, there is.
And how much money is in this fund, please?
Holly, you want to take that, or Mr. Mazuka? Let's get you a mic, though.
So,
and can you please identify yourself?
thank you. Holly Jones, District 6, and the Assistant Director of Community Development and Acting Conservation Agent. The last time that I checked in with our finance department, there was the tune of $104,000 currently in that account. It does gain interest, so it'll be a little off from that, but that's about what we have.
Okay, thank you. Now, does the CPC plan to request $10,000 a year to add to this fund? I think that would be a good idea.
I think we'll have Ms. Jones come back.
I think it's very likely that if the town meeting is supportive of this allocation, that the Conservation Commission will continue to make this request so that we can grow that fund.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brody. Yes,
Carol McClay, District 8. Is this an appropriate use of community preservation funds?
yes. I'm seeing, it is allowed. I'm seeing the committee all. Anything else? Seeing none, let's put it to a vote. $10,000 to be appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund balance reserved for open space and recreational use of land, and to be transferred to the Conservation Land Fund. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. Motion carries. Mr. Slater, motion 7.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Motion by the Finance Commission, motion number 7. Based upon the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee that $41,040 be appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund balance reserved for open space and recreational use of land, the fund a master plan for Winslow Park, AKA Veterans Memorial Park, as proposed by the Office of the Town Manager in collaboration with the Veterans Service Office.
And Mr. Sheehan, you're seconding again. And I just want to note that even Mr. Mulcahill is not here tonight, unfortunately, but that his office totally supports as the Veteran Services agent, totally supports this particular project. Any questions? Seeing none, let's put it to a vote. This is $41,040 to be appropriated from the reserved for open space and recreational use of land fund to fund a master plan for the Winslow Park. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. Motion carries. Motion number 8, and Mr. Slater, before you read this, I am going to disclose that I am a member of the Morse House Subcommittee and have conferred with Town Council, and because I will get no financial gain that I know of from the next 2 articles, I am not going to recuse myself and do not have to. With that, Mr. Slater on the motion.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Moved by the Finance Commission, motion number 8. Based upon the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee that $10,000 be appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund balance reserved for historic resources to fund efforts to list the Morse House on the National Register of Historic Places as proposed by the Board of Selectmen and the Morse House Subcommittee.
And again, Mr. Sheehan, you are seconding. All right, I do have one registered speaker, Ms. Eskow from District 5 on this motion.
Tony Eskow, District 5, and a member of the Norwood Historical Commission and a member of the Morse House Subcommittee that has met over the past year. So first, I'd like to thank all those members who helped us come to this place, and to thank Mr. Sheehan for the summary that he gave on the community preservation projects. First, I'd like to say that if you didn't get one, there was an informative flyer on the town meeting resource table when town meeting members entered, so I hope you feel you have enough information to vote on this. I'd also like to add that as municipal-owned buildings go, Norwood's only registered home that they own is Norwood Town Hall. We do not own any other registered building in the town of Norwood, and it's time to get this house on the map. The Day House is registered, and full disclosure, the Norwood Historical Society manages and operates the Fred Holland Day House. So we are very excited about getting this application moved forward. We fully believe that it will be approved. It can be a lengthy process, 1 or 2 years, but we also want to make sure we secure the house, which is the reason for the next motion. And that, too, was guided completely by the GNAP report, which was a master plan that was funded by community preservation funds a couple years ago. So we really ask for your support and hope you find this a beautiful and worthy project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eskel. Mr. Pachkowski.
Ernie Pachakowski, District 9. So we're funding a consultant for the consideration, $10,000 for a consultant to put it on the Registry of Historic Places, which is all well. My two questions first would be, is this something that the Historic Commission could undertake, or is it the consultant needed? And the second, Mr. Sheehan mentioned that if it gets on the Register of Historic Places, it might be there may be possible grants available for it. But being a town-owned property, are there any, I'd like to ask the Historic Commission, if you get this designation, are there any restrictions put on the house? It's a town-owned piece of property, maybe down the road, we may want to give it to the school department as an education center. We may want to sell it. We may want to do something, renovations. Just does anyone know, if it gets this designation, are there any restrictions as far as altering it, selling it, you know, cutting it up or whatever? Thank you.
All right, Mr. Pachkowski, actually, Mr. Plasko, who is chair of the Morse House Subcommittee, is going to take that one.
No, there's no restrictions placed or conditions that would affect the town's ability to do anything it might choose to do in the future. It just gets the designation. What it does do, if we get the designation and we decide to continue to restore it and keep it historical, for historical purposes, it may make grants available to do that work. But there's no and there may be conditions on those grants if we take them, but just getting the designation, there's no restriction.
Okay. Ms. McLean.
Carol McLeod, District 8. I was just kind of wondering, if we do restoration work on it, is that going to affect its ability to be designated a historic place?
Mr. Plasko.
Yeah, we're advised by the folks we talked to about this process that could happen. That's why we want to oversee the project carefully and make sure that the work we do will not compromise that task.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor.
Jane Ferrara Taylor, District 8. Spent a lot of hours in Morse House doing Christmas trees. It's a beautiful home. One of the things that, Bill, you're correct, the windows have to be replaced with older windows, so it's a really big expense. But I stand in support of both of these articles, and I'm going to do it. Dale Day is still alive, but I'm going to do it for her because she spent, I bet, half her life in that building. And I think she deserves a yes on both of these. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Mr. Bodenhoff.
Yeah, Eric Bodenhofer, District 9. Through you, Madam Moderator, I think probably to the Morse House Committee in general. But do we have a plan for the Morse House? We've had a study. It's been, the town's owned it since 1973. I hear things about a cultural center, an education center, a historical center. I mean, in some ways, I think these motions are a little backwards, but we're about to be asked for $300,000 to restore a house, and I don't really know that I know why. I mean, putting aside its historical value, what are we planning to do with it?
Mr. Plasko.
That's really under the next article, as you, I think, indicated. This designation would not affect anything else that we might do with the property. So unless we want to come to a conclusion that we don't want to spend any more money on the property other than maybe tear it down, that does no harm and possibly good for us to get this designation.
Madam Moderator, response? But if we spend $10,000 to get a house registered that we want to tear down, that's $10,000 we shouldn't have spent. So I think we're putting the cart before the horse here, and we should really have an idea what we want to do with that building, what value it serves to the town of Norwood before we, and I understand that there are 3 phases to this restoration. There's a plan that involves, I think it's 7 figures. So we're about to vote possibly to put $300,000 towards this, knowing full well that we're going to have to put more towards it in the future.
Actually, Mr. Bodenhopper, I don't want to interrupt you, but I am going to correct you, because I believe the next article, which actually talks about shoring up the house, is less than $200,000. So.
Madam Moderator, I agree, but I read the minutes of the CPC, and there was a note that there's a master plan that has a 7-figure restoration plan, and someone said that this is a much smaller amount than that, which is obviously true. But if we're just shoring up the exterior with the idea that, what are we going to use it for? And if we have to repair the interior to use it for anything, then we're going to be back here putting more money into it. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't. I'm just saying I don't understand why, because there doesn't appear to be a clear plan for the house going forward.
So again, I'm going to say that right now what we're discussing is the $10,000 for the National Register. The next article will talk about spending money to shore up the house.
Fair enough, Madam Moderator, but I still think even for this $10,000, it should be reasonable to get an answer as to what the plan is for the house.
I think Ms. Esco would like to comment on that as a member of the Morse House Subcommittee and Historical Commission.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Again, Tony Esco, District 5, and a member of the Norwood Historical Commission in the subcommittee that met for the past year. First, I think you should all know that the committee vetted out the house very, very thoroughly. We all visited the house. We each had homework, and we checked with all other directors, administrators in the town to make sure there wasn't any other department that needed the house. The superintendent was contacted, the library director was contacted. I spoke to Norwood Cultural Council members, some Norwood Cultural Council members, Together Yes, groups like that. One of the other members talked to realtors. So we vetted out the house that way, and we felt confident that there was no other immediate need that this house could be used for at the time. The future of the house was based on its future being secure. And I know there's talk of properties to the right and left going down, but we can't go forward with a plan unless we know it's secure. The Morse House Subcommittee agreed to continue to meet. Following these articles, we will continue to meet, discuss management and governance styles, and secure the future use, regulations, how it might be managed, whether it stays the way it was, but with more volunteers, or whether it would be a nonprofit group that could be formed to manage it, or a other nonprofit. It's still wide open. But the discussion about its future can't take place unless we know the future of the house is secure. And that's what we're trying to do. If you read the flyer on the house, this house represents Norwood's whole history. We embarrassingly have nothing in the state's book on the National Register of Historic Places, and this house meets the criteria on so many levels. So we ask that you fund these 2 projects, secure the house. We're only asking for the outdoor envelope. And the figure that the previous speaker refers to, the GENAP report, had lots of things in it that we're not going to do. It was a feasibility study and a master plan. And we took the essence out of it from the structural firm company that said the house is in fair to good condition for the age of the house and the minimum work that's been done to it, except for the volunteer work that was done to it, which saved it. We've put no money of any great import into this house. We got it for $1, almost exactly 50 years ago to the day. Town meeting accepted it on May 11th in 1973. I hope you'll give this house a grand 50th anniversary present and fund both of these articles and let us get this house to look like the shining gem that it deserves to be, and so it can represent all 150 years of our history and even before. So rest assured, you're not going to see a $2 million project come. We want to look for donations, we would look for grants, and things like that. And I'm not going to say that we wouldn't use CPC again, perhaps, but I'm not the only one in charge. There's a committee with this. And I want to thank the Morris House Subcommittee. They're all very busy people, and that included Tony Mizuko, Mr. Bill Plasko, Jerry Slater, Steve Keefe, another town meeting member, and myself. And every possible question was asked about this house, and this is unanimously brought forth to you after being vetted significantly. And it will be a house that will be a beautiful gateway entrance from East Walpole into Norwood, because it was all about the Morses. Also, Morse and his family, George Henry Morse, his family, his parents, and other ancestors are buried in Old Parish Cemetery, which makes this a great companion project to Old Parish. So I ask for your respect and dignity for these two projects. Thank you.
Mr. Hall.
John Hall, District 6, and a member of the Community Preservation Committee. Ms. Esco's presentation I thought was excellent, but I want to give another bit of logic to the conclusion she drew by analogy. A few years ago, you'll remember that we went through a number of iterations on what to pay for and what to do with the chapel. And we ended up with three options. One is you shore up the outside envelope enough that the building won't fall down, but beyond that, it's mainly available as something you can drive by and look at and do things outside of. The second was that you do things that are a minor stress on the chapel, and the third, which might have involved musical groups with amplifiers inside, puts heavy stress. And each of them had a price. In the end, we voted for the middle one. But all of them required that you have a building that's standing. That's kind of where we are now. In the earliest discussions of the Morse House's future, many of them did not assume that the building would still be standing or that there'd be any historical building there. They have gotten past that point. They are now at the point of saying it's going to be a historic building. We need to do the things required to make sure there is a historic building there. There are many other choices to be made, but there are choices with negligible cost that would still allow it to be used and used effectively for historic events, outdoor events and the like. So I don't think anybody has to be worried that we're going to be sinking a bunch of money and that in the end will be of no value at all. Rather, we're doing the things that we need to do now so that we can have the discussions later of a building that's still standing.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Mr. Brody?
Steve Brody, District 4. Yeah, I've been inside the Morse House. It deserves to be saved for whatever reason. And obviously, I'm in favor of this article. Let's get the house on the historic places. And then I'll be in favor of the next article. Yeah, let's save the house. It deserves to be saved. It's definitely worth the historical significance for Norwood. Thank you.
Mr. Taylor?
Jack Taylor, District 8. I rise to move the question.
All right, I think you've been seconded as well. Question has been moved. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. No. All right, on motion 8, to fund $10,000 from the Community Preservation Fund balance reserved for historic resources to fund the efforts to list the Morse House on the National Registry of Historic Places. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. No. Motion carries. Moving to motion 9, but Mr. Slater, before you say that, I am going to tell folks that the Celtics won 95-86. Mr. Slater, go ahead with motion 9, please.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, for the good news. Also good news, this is the last motion. With that, motion of the Finance Commission, motion number 9. Based upon the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee, that $96,000 be appropriated excuse me, from the Community Preservation Undesignated Fund Reserve, and that $96,000 be appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund Balance Reserve for Historical Resources to fund the rehabilitation of the Morse House exterior as proposed by the Board of Selectmen and the Morse House Subcommittee.
And again, Mr. Sheehan is seconding. Ms. Esco, I have you registered here, but you may have said everything you wanted on the last one. All right.
Just real quickly, because someone had asked, application process can be complicated. I know we just passed it, but it requires assistance. But on this article, again, it was guided by the GNAP report, and there are structural things like the basement. One of the support beams is a bare tree trunk. Would like to support that and be able to increase the live load capacity of the house. And also we'll be using the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, which means that we can use the house obviously for different purposes and not as a home, which is the way George Henry Morse used it. We're not preserving it as a residential home as it was when he lived in it. But we would have to keep the outside looking like Italianate architecture, things like that. And so rest assured that it doesn't limit us as much on the inside as much as it does on the outside. But of course, we would still want to preserve the natural woodwork and those features that make it Italianate. So you're not going to see a big change in the way it looks on the outside.
Thank you, Ms. Esco. Mr. Bodenhofer?
Eric Bodenhofer, District 9. So first I want to say, great work that the Historic Commission has done. I appreciate the passion for it, but I still didn't get an answer. What I got was, we'll get to an answer. And so what I would like to know is, if we do this, when can we expect to know what we're actually going to use the Morse House for?
Mr. Plasko, you want to take that, please?
An exact date, I don't know. I think it was referenced earlier, if I can give you a long answer. The committee did look into practically every use we could think of. We conferred with department heads about their departments and different things, possible programs or uses they might have for the property. We consulted with realtors and looked at just about everything we could. And we did this because the selectmen, after the first study was done that this body and the CPC funded in 2021, I believe, well, that's when it was concluded, felt that it was too expensive unless we had some town use for it. And so that's what we were doing, looking for a town use for it, other than maybe just a historical, save it historically, or what have you. We came back so far with that the most practical use for it is historical preservation and perhaps additional use as a location for activities through the Cultural Council. The full funding of what the cost might be long-term is not determined because we have to look into those phases. But what we've recommended so far is that we basically abandon the second floor, which out of the, if you saw that budget previously, over $2 million, cuts out a lot because it cuts out an elevator, in addition to house the elevator, and all the work that was going to be necessary to make, the second floor is actually 2 levels, and to try to make that meet all the building codes and accessibility issues, would have turned out to be quite expensive. So we're basically recommending restoring the building itself, maintaining it, with these funds, shoring it up, the foundation, everything as Ms. Esco just mentioned, so that we can then take the time to see what the interior costs might be. But it's going to be substantially less. We're also recommending a lot of it be done in-house with our own purchasing, with our own facilities department, and cutting out a lot of the soft costs as well as hard costs. So we think, we haven't got a hard number, but I think it's somewhere between 800 and 1 million at a total cost, but that's still not, you can't really count on that because we don't know what the final decision is, what we want to do with it, how far we want to go with it.
Thank you.
In the back. Actually, lower, and then we'll go upper. Right there.
Yeah, hi, Joe Sarno, District 4. I guess the question I have mostly, I kind of agree a little bit with the previous comment, I'm sorry, through you, Madam Moderator, about the plan. I think that's very important. You know, we went through this with the Forbes House. I'm just trying to make sure we're doing the right thing for our town. Again, we started off this whole budget meeting with what's a have to and what's a want and what do we need to do. We're on a budget restraint. We're trying to be careful with our money. I know it's not a real lot of money, but the other part is if taking into consideration this major construction project that's going to be happening starting in June. I mean, you're talking about rehabilitation of an exterior of a building when you're going to have a parking lot with construction vehicles literally right next door. So how is that going to affect the kind of money we're putting into this to change the exterior of a home that's going to get some abuse over 3 years of construction? So that's my biggest question.
Okay.
Is this the right time to use that money for the exterior, I guess?
So is the question specifically how the middle school building project might impact the Morse House location? I believe we had the middle school building committee chair here this evening, and it happens to be Mr. Slater, so we'll let him address that.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Alan Slater, District 4, also Chairman of the Middle School Building Committee. The contractors for the project are aware of the significance of the Morse House. The specifications are detailed that the Morse House is not to be touched or impacted in any way. So, I mean, that's the way, you know, the specifications are written, and I expect that that's ultimately what will happen, you know, at the project site.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear. I mean, we're using this money to rehabilitate the exterior, and there is a lot going on around the building. So I just think I just don't want to see it come back being like, oh, now we have to redo it because of way too much damage from dust, dirt, whatever, and we just spent all this money on it. So,
yeah, I mean, I agree with you. That's why, you know, we were very particular, you know, that everybody knows that the Morse House is there and what it represents.
Thank you. And way in the back.
Chris Griffin, District 2, move the question.
Second.
All right, the question has been moved. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. No. That was lively, thank you. Motion passes to move the question. That takes us to the motion, which is to take $96,000 to be appropriated from the Community Preservation Undesignated Fund Reserve, and another $96,000 be appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund Balance Reserve for Historical Resources to fund the rehabilitation of the Morse House exterior. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. Motion carries. All right, before I look at Mr. Connolly, I do think Mr. Hall wanted to just briefly make a very quick announcement.
John Hall, District 6. Thank you, Madam Moderator. Could I ask everyone in the room who is at least 51 years old to stand up? Okay, you can sit down. Everybody sees who's up and who's not. You are the only people in this room who were alive when Michelle DeGrazio was hired by the Norwood Library and began her service. Michelle is the person who's retiring at the end of May that Director Cheever mentioned earlier in his remarks. She will retire as the second longest serving staff member employee of Norwood in its entire history across all departments. The only person who served longer by about a year is Norwood's first fire chief. So I've looked at the people who are coming along behind. Trust me, we will not see her like again in our lifetimes. I think this deserves some public celebration.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. I did not stand. All right, before I entertain a motion to dissolve, again, we want to thank everyone, General Manager's Office, Madam Clerk's Office, Finance Department, Sue Bartlett, fabulous job on the slides. Our runner, my God, awesome. And then last but not least, the unsung heroes, the custodians. These guys were amazing. They got this building ready, this room ready so quickly. You wouldn't believe it. And they break it down so quickly. The other night, they literally picked me up and put me in my car. NCM, thank you. Mr. Connolly. Ms. Taylor is seconding. All in favor? All opposed? See you guys. Thank you very much.